Russ.
Here we go. Good morning. Welcome to the Palo Alto Architectural Review Board meeting of Thursday, March 20th, 2025. Can we please get a roll call, please?
Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Chen,
Present.
Board Member Adcock,
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
And Board Member Balte is not present at the moment, but we do expect him any moment. So he will join us shortly, and I'd like to make a note of when he does arrive. Thank you. All right. At this time, we open the floor for public comment. This time is available for anyone from the public who wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda. If you'd like to speak about an agendized item, there will be time for that later in the meeting. Each public speaker will have 3 minutes to talk. Are there any public speakers? I see no one in the gallery today. And is there anyone online?
No, I have no requests.
Okay, great. And we will close public comment. Agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
No changes planned for today.
Do we have an agenda change for next week or next meeting?
We do have that, and I can provide more detail in the city official report.
Perfect, thank you. So no agenda changes, additions, or deletions for today. And on to city official reports. Thank you, Stephen.
All right, well, let me share my screen here. So as for what you had mentioned, the chair, there is the April 3rd meeting canceled due to a lack of items. And we did not have any recently submitted items to the city received for development proposals that would come before the board. So if we're going through meeting schedules, as mentioned, 4-3 would be canceled. And we also have canceled the Juneteenth, that 19th meeting as well. So as indicated in the packet as well as on the screen.
Great, thank you.
And I did have some further updates here. So we are having a tentative date for the ARB Awards on May 9th, and that would be around 5 to 7 p.m. We are working in coordination with the chair and vice chair in the background for some of that event planning. Following, say, next week, we are, or should I say council is holding some interviews on March 24th for the 3 vacancies. So that includes 2 incumbents on the board as well as the last bullet point on the slide, which is for outgoing board member Balte. And with his absence here, I did want to just note that with the 4-3 meeting canceled, this potentially, depending on the outcome of this council interview, could be his last meeting with the board. So we can plan some award recognition, award of service to the ARB and the community of Palo Alto at a further date. So
that sounds great. Thank you. Anything else?
I can entertain any further questions. And just for the record, May 29th. I may have said May 20th.
Yes, okay, perfect. All right, does anyone else have any questions on that? All right, if not, we will jump right into.
Just want to.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I just would like to, formally hope that we could invite the council to our award entirely. We got 1 council person last time.
Mhm.
And maybe if we just do a formal thing, it would be appropriate to get them to come.
I think that's a great idea.
Thank you for that.
Okay, we're going to move on to action item number 2, public hearing quasi judicial. So I'm going to read the intro. Public hearing quasi judicial 180 El Camino Real, which is also known as Stanford Shopping Center. Recommendation on applicant's request for architectural review of exterior storefront revisions and improvements, including a redesigned outdoor dining area, facade renovations, new signage, and updated lighting for an existing restaurant with a new tenant, De La Rosa, at the Stanford Shopping Center. Recommendation from staff is recommends approval of the proposed project to the Director of Planning and Development Services based on findings and subject to conditions of approval.
And I would like to note for the record of board member Balte's presence at 8:38.
Noting the timer.
And I do have another note here. So on this item number 2, there is an app places memo that was circulated and should a printed copy be on the dais. And that is for the attachment of the draft findings of approval. So that would be attachment F, now labeled. Attachment B and C was a duplicate of attachment C. So
Perfect, thank you.
with that, I can turn it over to
Well, I'm going to take
Staff
2 more
planner.
seconds if that's all right. So number 1, I'd like to ask that each of the board members has visited the site. Can we just go down the line?
I did not get a chance to visit the site. I apologize.
I visited the site.
I did not visit the site this week, but I did a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I visited the site yesterday.
Oh, I visited. Yes, I did visit the site.
Excellent. And then do we have any disclosures? Nothing to disclose, nothing to disclose, nothing to disclose. Okay, great. Thank you. With that, Ms. Harrison, thank you very much. You can take it away.
Thank you, Chair, board members. Tamara Harrison, Michael Baker International, presenting for city staff as contract planner. Go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so as stated, the project for De La Rosa, a new tenant that will be going into the Stanford Shopping Center at 180 El Camino Real. The project location, oh, excuse me. The project location is located in Building D and Suite 136B. That's on the western edge of the shopping center off of the Sand Hill entrance, and is formerly the CPK location. The Stanford Shopping Center is subject to a master tenant facade and sign program. In this illustration here, you can see that the green lines indicate those tenant spaces that require city review per the program. Any storefronts that are 35 feet in length or greater require an ARB public hearing, such as De La Rosa, which is before you today, and any storefront that is less than 35 feet require a staff level review. Again, the project is located within the Stanford Shopping Center off of Sand Hill Road, and it seeks to change the existing facade to accommodate a new tenant restaurant, which is De La Rosa, and also proposes a new signage for the restaurant. The project won't change the floor area ratio of the shopping center or the lot coverage, nor does it propose to change the use of the tenant space, but it will again update the facade improvements by cleaning and repairing the existing roof screen, patching, prepping, and painting existing stucco, use of new perforated metal panels, illuminated signage. There will be metal cladding on an existing awning, on a new awning with a wood underside. There will also be blade signs. There will be new wall tiles, base tiles. The entry doors will receive a new wood treatment, and then also some new wall sconce lighting. The facade has been determined to be consistent with the master program and is also consistent with the center's character. So on the colors and materials, you can see some of the finishes here. We have the perforated aluminum panels, which will go on 2 sides of the facade. So the western facade facing the parking lot, as well as the northern facade. The patio areas will be treated with planter boxes, as well as umbrellas. Here, again, you can see the wood that will go on the underside of the canopy, as well as at the entry doors. The wall tiles are of a gray tone. They're hex wall tiles that will go on various portions of the facade, as well as base tiles that are also gray in color. Accent lighting will have like these orange wall sconces, as well as white wall sconces. As far as signage goes, the master program does allow for 1 primary wall sign, 1 secondary wall sign, as well as 1 blade sign typically for all tenants. However, At the center, we have been allowing the corner tenants to have two blade signs, excuse me, given the fact that the center is a pedestrian center. And the purpose of those blade signs is to notify pedestrians walking through the center of upcoming tenant spaces. So De La Rosa does propose 4 signs in total. So they'll have a wall sign on the primary facade, a wall sign on the secondary facade, as well as a blade sign on the primary facade and 1 blade sign on the secondary facade. All of the proposed signage has been found to be consistent with the Palo Alto Municipal Code, that's section 1620, as well as consistency with the master program for the center. For key considerations and conditions, we want to ensure that the project is in conformance with the ARB findings, which staff has found that they are in conformance with the findings, as well as the master program and again, section 1620 of the city sign code. So with that, staff recommends that the Architectural Review Board take the following action and recommend approval of the proposed project facade changes and signage to the Director of Planning and Development Services based on findings and subject to staff's conditions of approval. This concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Harrison. At this time, we open this questions to staff. So if we have any limited questions to the staff, now is the time to ask that. I just wanted to confirm if that's all right. All the signs are in conformance. There's no questions there, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then do we have any restrictions or regulations on colors specifically in Stanford Shopping Center? Or is it's just allowed to be whatever is needed for the project or for the applicants?
Yeah, I think there's like some language that like some of the brighter or not more common colors are limited to more like accent features. And so you will see that throughout the center, even on this edge of the shopping center. We previously had Yucca de Lac that had like some orange colored curtains that will now be Sushi Roku that has like a red signage. And on further down that corridor, the Melt, if you remember the Melt, has like some bright orange accent colors. They are also doing in the middle of a redesign, but they will maintain their bright orange signage as well. And then I think currently the CPK kitchen, had a use of like some lime green colors and accent colors and things like that.
Okay, great. And then is there any restrictions on LRV? So the light refractive value of a white color would be the other question that I have. Do we have anything like that for Stanford Shopping Center, that something's too bright white?
Yeah, I do not believe that's in the program, in the master program.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any other questions?
I just have one question to Ms. Harrison. You mentioned the canopy was new, the documents that existing. I just would like some clarification if it's new cladding over existing canopy or all new installation.
Apologies, it's going to be new cladding over existing canopy and then the new wood underside.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's no further questions to staff, we would have an applicant presentation for the next 10 minutes. Is the applicant present on Zoom? I'm assuming Zoom because there's nobody here.
I think, yes.
Yes, I do see. Hannah, are you able to hear us? I don't necessarily see. Oh, there's Hannah.
Hi.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi. Sorry about that. Hi. My name's Hannah Walbridge. I represent De La Rosa, Back of the House Inc. in De La Rosa.
Perfect. Do you mind spelling your name for the record, please?
Yeah, it's Hannah, Hannah. Last name is Walbridge, W-A-L, Bridge, B-R-I-D-G-E.
Perfect. And take it away. You have up to 10 minutes.
So I didn't come with a formal presentation today. I wasn't actually aware that we would have a time on the agenda to speak other than Tamara's presentation, but I do want to say we are a local concept. We are Italian, casual, small plates, fire roasted pizzas, good cocktails. We like to provide a place for all different kinds of use. We'd like to have families come. We like to have we like to be a date night spot. We like to do parties. We like to be a kind of a casual in and out place. And I think it would be a really good accompaniment to the center and to Palo Alto. We're based out of San Francisco. Our first location is on Chestnut Street, and it's a neighborhood restaurant and has been there since 2012. And we have another location in Yerba Buena Lane in San Francisco, and then another in San Ramon in the city center there. And it's done really well there. It's particularly popular with families and throughout the weekends and takeout as well. So I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of the concept and why we think it would be a really good fit for the center.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah,
If you don't mind staying on the line for a couple more minutes here.
no problem.
We typically hold questions to the applicant until after public comments. So I'm going to ask if there's any public comments on this one. Any raised hands on Zoom?
I have no request to speak.
Okay, so process is closed to public comment. So if we have any questions for the applicant at this time, now would be the time to do it. My only two questions are sort of concerned about color, so I'm going to dive right into those. The
Okay.
orange color, that's your typical logo color, is that correct?
It's our brand color. I forget the exact Pantone. It's like a little bit of a richer, redder orange. Leans towards terracotta, but somewhere in between classic orange and terracotta.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
And I did notice you guys had some photos of other projects that you've done so that are executed in the packet. So that was actually quite helpful. And then my
Yeah.
question on the white is you chose Chantilly lace, and I have a specific thing about whites and their LRVs. So this is a nitpicky thing for me. It's a very bright white. Is that the only white that you considered? Is it something that you've used in other places before? Why that color white?
That's interesting. So we first had China white. And we've used China white. We used China white a lot over the past 10 years, and it's looking a little dated. We wanted something a little fresher, a little brighter. So yeah, that was the intent. We could find something in the middle, but the idea was to kind of brighten it up, especially in that center. Looking around, everybody has very strong identity, each storefront. So we wanted to make sure that we could really make a change and make it feel like our own, because especially to, a pizza concept, going in for a pizza concept,
Yeah.
people, might not really care, but we definitely find ourselves very different than CPK and want to kind of portray that from the initial, even just glance, I guess. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So then my only other question is that when looking at the renderings, that sort of this front image is probably a little bit more true to color palette with this white on the very front cover sheet versus something on like an A4.0 that looks a little bit more cream colored. It really is going to be that true Chantilly lace white.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Can I jump in with another question? It's kind of related to the canopy that I'm looking through my notes from reviewing your documents. Ms. Harrison, if you could pull up the picture, the existing CPK photograph, it looks like the canopy, existing one, just stops right at the edges of the door on either side, and the renderings for the new extends out further on each direction. So is that just extension of cladding or additional support? Looks like, at least on a 4.0, bless you. Looks like additional hanger rod is added. I just want to understand the scale of the new canopy versus existing, which seems to extend further in both directions. Actually, if you go to the next page, I think. 4.1. There we go. So actually, this is a good place to look at it. The photograph shows on the left corner, shows the existing canopy stops right at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And on the rendering on the right, the canopy extends all the way to where your tile starts on the left. Is that intentional?
That is intentional. We wanted to line it up. We wanted to make that front corner proud, almost like just an obvious, and we have the perforated orange metal above, and we wanted to line it up with that, the end of that, which also falls, as you can see, with like a transition in the finish, the wall finish.
Right. So would that require replacement of the whole canopy to extend, double the distance on the one side?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know yet. That is up to the structural engineer. And we just haven't been allowed to take a close enough look yet to determine that because it's still occupied by CPK. So ideally, we would just add another section and then we would clad the whole face and the section would be welded, and then supported from another rod from above. But it's still yet to be confirmed that that's possible.
Okay, thank you.
So on that very issue, again, the supports, you're not showing any way in which the cable is connected through the new metal cladding at the top. Is it going to be interrupted in some way, or is this a detail that you're going to be working on?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's shown with a cable support, right?
Yes.
And the cable kind of meets up with the metal surface of the building there. And there is no kind of indication of detail at that point, right? Is it, would that be through a separate plate that is then attached to the face and
Yes,
interrupts it in some way?
we'd have to anchor it. Yeah. Are you talking about the cladding around the face?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Or welded. I'm not sure.
But it's a detail yet to be kind of worked out. Okay.
In the same vein, that applies then to the tiebacks themselves. Right now have a rather industrial look with some threaded turnbuckles on them. Are you planning to keep those or replace them with something sleeker, welded rods, for example?
Something sleeker.
Okay, so you are planning to change the length, the extension of the canopy on both sides and the tie rods. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. On the right-hand side, the canopy is not showing as going the full width of the orange panels above. You're showing a gray piece of fascia trim sort of tying into the rest of the building. That's not existing now. Is that the intention, and to add another piece of trim horizontally? I'm looking at
Yes. So that it would so that it would be similar all the way around.
and is there any detail of how that would be done, or is that still to be determined?
That's to be determined as well.
Okay, thank you for answering the question.
Can you, have you thought about the drainage at the top of your canopy? Where is that? Can you take that inside the building?
Can we take that inside the building? That's a good question.
Hi, Hannah. This is Ty with Chrome Architecture.
Yeah.
I can
Ty, if
speak
you
to
want to
that.
address that, that'd be great.
I was having some connectivity issues at first, but yes,
If you don't mind, please state and spell your name for the record.
yes, this is
Thank you.
Titan Davis, Titan, last name Davis, Davis, with Chrome Architecture.
Great, please go ahead.
So yeah, the intent at that entry awning canopy structure, it's truly to utilize what we can with the existing structure and grow in both directions, as Hannah has explained. The tie rods will be replaced with something sleeker, and the detail and connection to the main facade and penetration through that perforated panel is all to be determined, but will be detailed as sleek and minimalist as possible. The ephes stucco trim to the right of the main entry is indeed existing. I don't recall what's going on at the left, but if it's not existing, it would be existing or new to match existing detailing there. It's hard to see the existing stucco trim because it's kind of tucked under the CPK awnings as they exist now, but there is a small ephes trim type there that we're just going to simply patch, repair, and paint.
And if I could, why don't you continue the awning at the front, the full width of the orange panel above it? You're showing it's stopping, say, 4 or 6 feet before the end of the orange part of the building. That projects forward 6 inches or so on the facade.
But that shape lines up with what's happening below, right? So that are you talking about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some relationship there that they've created with the seating area.
Possibly, but the facade has got an awkward break. They're having to create well, I'm asking the question of the architect. Why did you choose to leave it this way?
It was respecting the seating layout.
Okay, thank you.
So the drainage, you haven't really worked out the drainage for the canopy yet, huh? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. And we actually received building department comments on that. So the existing CPK awning structure is just sloped to drain, onto the mall common area walkway. And, there was a plan check comment that came through that, awnings are not allowed to drain onto the public right of way. But this is, mall common private area. I don't see that to apply. So we were planning to leverage the same drainage that is existing.
Okay, good luck there. And then you'll detail the top of the canopy to the point where it does slope to drain, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Can you explain how you're going to provide heating under those awnings for the seating?
Yeah, so currently existing, there's post-mounted gas heaters. And one of them is actually in an area of easement for the Public Works Department. So we will be keeping any that are outside of the easement area and relocating one that is currently located in the easement area.
That's enough to really get under a canopy like that, under the umbrellas?
It's working for CPK currently, yes, I think so. You can see in their photos.
What drawing number is that?
I was looking at the photos of CPK. It's kind of hard to see here, but maybe on A 4.2, if you go to the bottom left, you could see that they have their existing gas heaters just under the umbrellas there. Yeah. And so there's numerous that are actually in the area of easement. So we'll be relocating those.
It seems to me that it would be really nice to be able to do a canopy, the umbrellas with some kind of heater within them, but maybe they can't make something like that.
We actually proposed a canopy all the way around for the whole patio, but then we had to remove it because there's a 20-foot easement for the utility room on the front elevation. So then we proposed a canopy that could be disassembled for that 20-foot easement. And then the building department came back with a requirement that there had to be 20 feet in between us, the outside of our patio, and the patio for Sushi Roko. And that didn't allow us enough seating underneath that canopy. And they didn't have enough parking because then it became considered covered space where we had to do a new parking calculation and there wasn't enough parking. So we've been through we spent almost 8 months redesigning, and unfortunately had to just remove it altogether.
Understood. Time, you ran out of time.
Yeah, time and too many regulations. So unfortunately, from different, everybody has to abide to their code.
Yeah.
Had a couple of questions on the planter and railings. So how tall is the planter box? It seems like they have different heights from the railing next to it.
I feel like that was documented in the application. I think we were at 42 or 44.
For the railing or for the planter box?
I will have to pull up the plans here.
On A 4.0, you show 40,
Looks like, yeah, 44 for the railing, and then I guess maybe 42 for the planter boxes.
Okay, so that is something not decided yet for the,
Well, then I can see. So on A 4.0, I'm seeing a dimension to the guardrail at 3'8".
Mhm.
And then I believe we provided a planter box detail, yeah, on sheet A 4.1. And the we had it 3 feet tall. So a difference of 8 inches.
Apologies that my screen is loading so slow.
On A 4.0, on the right-hand corner, you have there's a sort of a blue something or other in the background. It doesn't really exist, does it? Is it a possibility?
I'm sorry, that's just a limitation of the rendering software used. It was just like the sky beyond, you
Okay,
know.
I see. Well, but the question was, that's kind of hanging out there, that piece of the seating. Is it possible to do something like almost what's shown on the drawing there to provide some kind of or is that not allowed?
There will be seating down the mall walkway there, yes. Is that the question?
There's,
Yeah.
are you talking about, you're talking about the awning, the actual awning itself, correct? That's,
Well, I'm talking, yeah, I mean, I'm saying that,
so
yeah,
that's a retractable awning that covers a certain length. I'm forgetting the exact footage of that elevation, of that side elevation. And that was the only, that was our solution because that was the last amount of square footage allowed to be covered. So we kind of we did a retractable awning that would come to start at the corner of that elevation and go down as on the side that enters the mall, go down, and it would be, come out the distance of the width of the patio.
okay, so, but is it possible, that's your other door, the access to that area.
Yeah.
Is it possible to do an enclosure the way, with the way the sky looks in this actual drawing so that you would have sort of privacy to that dining area back there? Do you understand my question? Is that possible in the center? To create some kind of a closure?
I think that this is the concept that we've been struggling with is we've tried in numerous attempts to provide kind of an enclosed private seating area, but the limitations of the clearances and the covered square footages just don't allow for a more permanent private kind of dining setting at that side. There's I believe the existing CPK seating is not in compliance with the 20-foot clear.
So it's tighter than what is shown, what is presently there?
Correct. The current CPK footprint sticks out 2 feet past the 20-foot clearance. And so when we took the space over and started designing, we figured we had that footprint. And so we designed a whole enclosed pergola and awning structure all the way around from,
Yeah.
Yeah. But then with the comments and going back and forth, we really tried to convince them to allow us the variance, but we didn't win that debate. So.
Oh, dear.
That's
Yeah.
where the applicant's team was indicating they were running up against some egress issues that were required by the building department. So they had to redesign here and leave this open to maintain the 20-foot free and clear from the sushi Roku space.
Yeah. And as you can see, the seating then becomes really tight to get tables and servers in there. And if you, yeah, I mean, we can put a canvas maybe drop down at that end that would
And
help
you could do
enclose it,
that? Yeah, that would make
you
a,
know.
I think that would be a big improvement if you could.
Yeah, I mean, and we have that in several of our locations, just to kind of, like you're saying, like kind of create more protection and make it more of a comfortable seat, hold the heat in, keep out, the people. It just makes it more of an intimate space.
Yes, it does. So
Mhm.
it's also to continue that kind of a discussion, you have the metal railing there on the outside of that area.
Mhm.
That's what's going to be shown. What is there now? Is that going to be what you're going to have? The metal, presently existing metal railing?
No, this would be a
No.
new metal, a sleek modern metal, powder coated white with a white oak cap, as rendered. Best seen on a 4.0, elevation number 3,
Yes, I see
probably.
on 4.0.
Yeah.
Just a point of discussion here is maybe it would be possible to continue the kind of the fabric enclosure, since it has to probably remain as thin as possible, and to incorporate that into the face of the railing. So there's some closure to the outside there and more privacy to the people who pass on the outside.
Yeah.
Is
I
that
mean,
a-
the one problem, yes, I see what you're saying. The problem is that we only have the overhang canvas for a
Yes,
portion of that elevation.
well, I'm talking about at least up to the railing height there. Continue,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
just provides in some enclosure there.
Mhm,
I think
mhm. Yeah, and that's a way to hold it down too. In the wind, we can create, what we usually do, like an attachment either to, if we do it to the ground, we do it in the ground. Or if we do it, sometimes we'll do it to a planter box or to a railing, and then you create a clip and then it kind of holds it taut.
Good, yeah, okay. Just
Yeah.
a suggestion of an area that I would have
Yeah,
questioned as a design question in the first place, but we just seem to be there discussing it, so I thought I'd ask.
yeah. We can cantilever a panel off that's the width of the patio.
Okay,
Question though, in that area, you have a rope guard on removable stanchion post. And David, is that where you're asking for something in this direction or closing in the front?
just sort of the face of that railing somehow, that attach something to that solidifies the sense of that return. Maybe if they are choosing a color, it's the same thing as the end panel that I think is possible as well.
Because
I don't know where that rope actually is being used. Oh, you're saying it's being used to raise the awnings or what?
no, the rope is over, if you go to A 4.3, it
Okay,
shows it in that angled view.
A 4.3.
Yeah, right here. There's a removable stanchion with a rope guard. That seems like an unfortunate way to end the patio area. I don't know if that's it needs to be removable for exit or something. But that kind of, I think, is that where you're talking about, David, as well?
I'm kind of not seeing the rope here. Bad.
I don't know if you can zoom in.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. That does
Like a,
seems like an unfortunate.
yeah.
Why
like
couldn't everything just turn the corner,
Yeah, I don't know if the guardrail could turn the corner or put one of your orange planter boxes.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, the orange planter box is kind of going to be isolated down there. I would have preferred to see orange planter boxes all around that whole
Yeah.
end, but
I know, we would have too. I mean, we had a beautiful pergola
Spaces.
designed with planter boxes in it. We just don't
Yeah.
have the width.
yeah, this space is just not available. So I think you have to do the best you can to turn.
Yeah. Yeah, we completely agree. It was a beautiful structure. I mean, we designed it looking at the center as a whole and wanting to be able to compete with some of the other, storefronts. It's beautiful. Unfortunately,
You know, it's across from one of our award-winning projects that, you know, that is very solid and turns the corner in a great way. So
yes.
it would be.
Yeah, we watched it being built, and so that's
Yeah.
why we designed the pergola that we did with, we had waterfalling, wood slats, we had built-in benches with planter boxes in them. I mean, it's beautiful. But unfortunately, we've got stripped down.
Yeah, okay, so.
They opened first. They won. They got their patios done. They can't take 2 feet out of their patio.
Uh-huh. So, but, you know, otherwise, it just, you also, I'm sure we would always want to have something that didn't detract from the quality across the way. So
Yeah.
I think you're aware of that, so we're fine.
Yeah.
I think
I think it'd be nice to bookend this a little bit more substantially.
Mhm.
Board Member Adcock has sketched on the screen here, and I fully support that. I think it's also a nice way to bring back that orange color, get that pop of color, so helping with wayfinding. So when people are walking up and down, they see that pop of orange and they know exactly where they're headed.
Yeah.
Good point.
I have further questions about this whole issue, but I think Board Member Chen was in the middle of asking questions, so maybe you should finish first.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Oop.
actually, it covered my second question. I was looking for where the rope is, but now I find it out.
Okay.
So I would like to ask staff then to explain, please, what the business is about this 20-foot easement where they need to remove these planters every day. Secondarily, what is this 20-foot clear aisle requirement? That's a new one to me on the shopping center. Where did that come from? And thirdly, we do have a requirement that sidewalks maintain an 8-foot clear travel width. What I'm seeing is that we're allowing light poles and trees to project into that. And again, please explain the logic behind saying that this is compliant.
Yes. So I'll take your first question. The 20-foot easement area is approximately located right in here. And this was a requirement that came from the city's utilities team. So there's some utilities and a utility room, I believe, that's in this area that needs to be kept free and clear. So the planters that are located at the patio area here are on like rollers or coasters that can be moved per the utilities instructions to the team. The mall egress of 20 feet.
Hold on, Tamara, excuse me, please. I want to understand more of the utilities. What I'm seeing on the building plan is a small room facing the parking lot. That's the utility room.
Correct.
And that room seems to be maybe 8 feet wide. And in front of that, they're asking for a 20-foot wide easement cleared every day. That doesn't seem to be done right now.
Yeah, I can't speak for what is occurring right now. I just know that the gas team, I believe it's a gas meter room, if the applicant's team can correct me if I'm wrong, but a gas meter room that the utilities team is requiring clearance for.
And I see a street tree planted directly in front of this in the middle, in this utility easement. Yeah.
Correct. And like
staff, I mean, is this easement some recorded thing that's a legally required easement, or is it really just a request by the utility division for access to their facilities? It's a significant impediment to the mall and to the tenants.
Good afternoon. This is Richard Wessels with Simon Property Group, if I may interject.
Please.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, again, Richard Wessels, spelling of the last name is Wessells. And I'm manager of tenant coordination with Simon Property Group. The 20-foot easement that runs to the face of the building is a recorded document that is in the hands of the city attorney right now. And that has been mandated as part of an overall easement plan for the shopping center. And that was mandated if the city owns the gas line that runs up to the building, which sits within a 20-foot required easement, just in case there is ever a requirement to get into the ground for excavation, that 20-foot wide area be kept free and clear. And And right now CPK is they have been in violation of that.
So the easement requires daily clearance of the property, so the
No,
trucks.
what I'm to understand, Chairman, is that if there ever becomes a time where they need to excavate in this area, the utility company has the availability to just move these items out of the way and do the work. They do not have to be removed on a daily basis.
So where did the determination come from showing on the plans that they have to clear this on a daily basis?
That is an incorrect assumption, that they would have to just be removed when needed.
Tamara, could you please clarify all this? The plans are quite clear to something different than that.
Yeah, so my understanding was that it did need to be removed daily, but
That was my understanding as well from, I'm forgetting Jesse's last name, from Jesse, from the utility company.
Jesse
You-
Keene is his name, and yes,
Thank
he's been explicitly clear that those items are the areas to be cleared daily.
And if you
That's
don't
not
mind, I will get a hold of the recorded document and I will share it with the city, please.
Thank you.
And that'll clear up the requirement for that.
I'm just seeing this applicant stuck in a city bureaucracy here that doesn't make any sense. And I'm trying hard to we're in a position where we can advocate for what makes sense. And this is one of those where it just doesn't. It hasn't been done. It won't be done in the future. And just because we write it on a piece of paper. Tamara, could you continue with my other two questions, please, about the clearances?
yes, so the 20-foot clearance, from my understanding, is a building code requirement for mall egress. So that comment came directly from the building department that they needed the 20-foot clearance. I don't believe it was provided before, but when Sushi Roku went through, there was an agreement that, hey, whenever CPK turned over, we would make sure that the 20-foot was provided for. So the building team was very adamant that the 20-foot needed to be provided with this project. And as Hannah and Ty explained, that's why the design modifications were made to make sure that that 20 feet was being provided.
So I just want to understand, please, that the 20-foot is a 20-foot clear path of travel basically between buildings on this pedestrian walkway in the shopping mall.
Yes, and I don't believe it's just between buildings. It's like it just needs to be clear. So any sort of encumbrance. So or maybe it is building. Again, I don't want to speak because I'm not.
It is straight from the building code. It is an egress requirement, and it's 20 feet minimum aggregate. So, in the case where there's a planter box in the middle of the mall common area, providing 10 feet minimum on each side, or, any variation thereof. But aggregate clearance of 20 feet to egress from a mall is California building code.
So I'm not sure who had asked this question to them, but this is the first time I've seen this applied on the shopping center in almost 10 years of doing this. Just up the way where the fish market restaurant was put in, it was cut down to about 8 feet. And we were asking all kinds of questions about that. Told, okay, well, the market across the street is going to move the bins of oranges every day to get it bigger, but it was never 20 feet. It was never raised as an issue. Are we sure this applies this way? And if so, why hasn't it applied consistently? Again, to the applicant, it's just unfair to make their seating not work to get 20 feet. That doesn't apply anywhere else in the mall, apparently.
I mean, Peter, it would seem that this is a kind of an emergency situation where they would have to maybe take this back for just that purpose.
But why hasn't it applied everywhere else in the shopping mall?
Yes, good question, I think.
Mr. Wessels, are you aware of this requirement to other parts of the mall?
This is the first one we've come up to with this instance in this situation.
Is it a specific path of travel? Is this like the emergency egress lane versus like even just looking at the other side of this drawing, it's 15 feet. So I guess the question is there some specific path of travel that's required in this point, but maybe not at another point?
That's the way I'm understanding it, but I would have to direct that to Mr. Chung, because that's where the direction is coming from.
Yeah, and again, it's the building and safety requirement. So sorry, I'm not too well versed on that, but I don't know if it's something that came as a result of a new requirement to Title 24, or if it's always been there. And I say that to say, like, maybe that's why some of the existing conditions are that way. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, well, I'm going to recommend, I guess, to the architect, it should fall on your shoulders to really push back a little bit and investigate this. Those 2 feet of extra seating area makes all the difference for the success of the outdoor seating area and the success of the restaurant, which we all want.
But again, this is Richard Wessels again. We've spent, between myself and the applicant, we've spent almost 6 months arguing this point to no avail. So at this point, I think as a tenant and as a landlord, we've basically exhausted our ability to negotiate this point with the city.
I understand. I'm not trying to hold you up on that. I'm just expressing, I guess, frustration with, I don't know who, staff then? I mean, who's advocating for these folks when we get a requirement that's brand new, apparently not applying other places in the mall, not even applying on their own drawings? And other aisles don't meet this 20-foot clearance. And the shopping mall has plenty of places where there's passageways less than 20 feet wide outdoors. And is it just David Chung has decided this is how we're now interpreting the building code and therefore that's it? Okay, I'll leave the question stand. The last question to you, Tamara, was about the 8-foot clearance and your interpretation of why it's allowed to narrow down there.
Yes, so just for everyone's purposes, the blue here on the screen is showing the 8-foot pathway. There are existing trees and light poles in that encroach into that pathway. And so staff did have discussion regarding those items, and it just made more sense to not dig up trees and lights for that 8-foot here in this section. Again, the light poles, taking those out would interfere with the tree roots. The city doesn't want trees really removed, so we made the decision to leave the existing trees and light poles that encroach.
So if I recall, when we had this happen recently in front of, I think it was the Fish Market restaurant, we had said we allow an exemption of 12 inches or something for a light pole or a tree to project into that 8-foot width. Was that into your calculation here, or was this just because you don't want to see the trees hurt the lights?
It was, we didn't really look at like 12 inches. We just did not want to disrupt the trees and the tree root system by replacing the lights. We did discuss about on a previous project replacing or relocating, I should say, some of the light poles. However, in this instance, doing so, of course, would also interfere with the tree root system. So the decision was made to leave as is.
Okay, thank you for answering the question.
Just for Peter briefly, I'm remembering the same project you are, but I think in that case, the distance, the 8 feet distance was up to the edge of the paving, the parking. So here, there's the extra 4'6" on the other side. So aggregately, they have more than 8 feet. It's just not all on one side of the trees.
I think that 8-foot is supposed to be clear, period, not aggregate. I think it's just supposed to be an 8-foot clearance. But again, it's one of those situations where I understand why the city is not forcing this to be an issue.
And as the owners also, we would not want to start cutting down trees or relocating trees in the shopping center if we don't have to.
Yeah, so to put some context on this, as the outdoor dining has become more popular, the architecture board had established I guess I'd call it an informal policy that we want an 8-foot clear path of travel between new added outdoor dining areas and the edge of obstruction. So you could have clear passageway for families, children and strollers, people in wheelchairs. And in places, this had gotten cut down quite a bit more. So we're trying to just sort of establish a clear guideline so applicants know what had to go on. I'm quite sure at a recent project, we decided that we should have some exception to allow projections into that for things like light poles. It's usually easy to navigate around. And we had established, I think it was a 12-inch projection. Again, staff, I'm dismayed to hear that you folks don't even seem aware of that. We've been through this so many times and we've done so many projects, and it helps the applicant so much just to know what the rules are. And
Chairman, if I may, our discussions with that encroachment was on the Melt, which is the adjacent tenant 2 doors down from, or 1 door
Yes.
down from Sushi Roku.
yes,
Where
that
we
could have
had,
been.
where we had moved that we've moved the light poles out of the middle of the walkway to 1 foot from the curb line, which gave you your 7-foot clear But with this particular location with CPK where it exists is to provide the council with the 8-foot clear. We would have to basically remove the trees and not plant them back in front of the building because we couldn't move them out to the curb line because it encroaches into the drive lane that we really didn't want to lose the trees in front of the building or the shopping center.
Thanks for the clarification. I'll pick that up when we get past the questions section of our hearing.
I have a question about access to the outside dining. I guess is this a gate or whatever that is shown on I see A1.1. I'm on. How do you get into the outside dining area? How do you choose if you're outside the restaurant to eat outside versus inside? I mean, is there a flow of traffic to the inside door and then you go out, or is that area, where's the entry into that outside dining?
Hannah, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that all patrons would come into the main entry door to be seated. Yeah.
So there's no gate there. It's a closed area on the outside.
That is correct. So they would come in and the host would seat them and then lead them out through the side door.
Okay.
I guess follow-up question to that is that why the rope stanchions are there on either end? Because that's your egress path from the outdoor dining?
Good point.
You have one over there too.
They aren't both needed for egress, and if they are not in favor, we're open to providing more permanent planter box structures. I don't think that either one of them are required.
But what would be your egress route then? If I'm seated here,
Are you asking about the second one being all the way around the corner? Because there's a straight out egress passage, right, from the door on the side of that side of the building facing Roku. But the one in the front is the issue, right? They're next to the front door.
yeah, I'm just wondering, like, for patrons seated here, then would they have to go inside to exit?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, good question.
I mean, as it currently is, and if we were to build a more permanent structure, yes.
It's an issue.
I don't see it as an issue, but if you do, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, we can create another exit. I mean, this, like I said, this, yeah. This
Not
is
quite our purview, but building departments. But yeah, I just want to flag that.
yeah. I see what you're saying. It would be cleaner to have another exit for the patio.
So it could be a gate. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. At that time, we will close the comments and close the questions portion, and we'll turn the discussion inward to the ARB panel. Who would like to start?
I'm happy to jump in. I don't see many problems with this project as far as meeting our standards. And I want to see this get approved today, obviously. I think there's questions about that awning, how big it is, how the trim is around it, what the brackets are and stuff. And that could either be left to the applicant and staff or come back to us for an ad hoc committee review. It can go either way. I guess my instinct is that these folks seem to have been run through the ringer enough. We should let them sail on. This is a small thing, and I'm sure they're going to do this reasonably well, but what's documented here isn't quite right. And then regarding all the site planning and stuff, they seem to have come to a solution they can live with, but I'm going to express strong disappointment with staff and with the applicant for not working harder. These regulations you're being held to are not entirely the whole story, and there's more you could do. But I understand you want to get this done, so run with it. But it's just not right what's going on with them right now. This is not the best solution for the shopping center, for the town. This is not a fully correct interpretation of all the codes, both easements, clearances, the whole package. So that's what I see from this point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to follow up with that. I'd like to see this moving forward as well. I don't have any major objections. I do find two things that could potentially come back for ad hoc, but I'd be open to the other board members' consideration on that. As one is the support system for the canopy, and number two is the egress and sort of finalization of the patio perimeter. I'm not super strong that it has to come back as an ad hoc. I don't think it's going to dramatically change the visual of the project. Would it be nice to have sort of a check-in just to make sure we're good to go? Yes, but again, I also feel like you guys have suffered enough. So like to keep this moving forward. The orange is very bright, but I also understand it's your color choice. I would just caution the Chantilly lace. If you get it up there and you see it's a really bright white, maybe just in the back of your mind, have a backup color there that might be a little bit more subdued. That Chantilly lace is just very high in its light reflective value. But again, it's not enough to cause any major disruption. So I'm pleased with this project and look forward to seeing you guys in the mall.
Thanks.
Yeah, I support approving this project, and I think the canopy as drawn looks right. Not have any hardware visible on the front, whether it's existing added on and clad over, or you end up replacing it just for continuity of structure. That's up to the applicant, and I think as intended is seems appropriate. So I don't think it needs to come back to ad hoc. But yeah, thank you for bringing this project to us.
Yeah, I'm in favor to this project as well, and no additional comments.
So I'm the last here. So to end up with a little bit of fun, the Chantilly lace makes me think about the Big Bopper. You guys probably don't know anything about that. It's 1959. Unfortunately, Buddy Holly, J.P. Richardson, who's the Big Bopper, and one other very well-known, Richie Valens died in an airplane crash in 1959. So the Big Bopper, the song is Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down, a wiggle in her walk and a giggle in her talk makes the world go round. So that's all on that issue. But it actually was a great era of music, I think, in inventiveness. So anyhow,
Different
I have
era
one-
in our world, yes.
I have just one issue remaining here, because I think we've talked about most every other issue, and that is the kind of casualness of these planters around the front door. They look like they're kind of from the hardware store, they don't look like they're, and so to me, they don't quite belong. I think they're going to be sort of a well-lit piece as well, because there's lighting in the canopy above. But aside from the other side pieces, which I think we've discussed and you've answered very well, I think you need to work on just what those planters look like. Again, Sophie Ruku, if you look at it, they're just beautifully put together around the corner. And this kind of casual, you could move them anywhere. Look to the front door doesn't strike me as a design issue yet, and you need to work on it. But everything else seems to me to be well answered, so there's really no reason to come back and proceed and get through all of this and get the thing open. That's all.
All right, on that note, I move to approve this project as presented.
Second,
Can we get a vote?
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Bolte,
yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg,
Yes,
motion carries 5-0.
thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to, and thank you, Ms. Harrison. Appreciate your presentation. Moving on to action item number 3, which is a study session to review and provide feedback on the proposed California Avenue signage program and outdoor activation approach for the car-free portion of California Avenue. And I do also want to say I would like to extend a warm welcome to Usma Thompson, who was formerly on the ARB, who is here as well with her little one in the crowd, and we'll be probably seeing her face shortly. But just wanted to formally say good morning. All right, so apologies, just getting to the thing. For action item number 3, the title is Review and Provide Feedback on the Proposed California Avenue Signage Program and Outdoor Activation Approach for the car-free portion of California Avenue. Recommendation by staff is to provide feedback on the place identity elements of the proposed signage program, review and comment on the wayfinding system, including sign types, locations, and concepts for California Avenue, review and comment at the outdoor activation zones, setbacks, and street space allocation map. And with that, I will hand it over to Bruce.
Hi, good morning, Bruce Fukuji. I'm with the city manager's office, and I'm the managing the planning for the California Avenue car-free streets. Great. So, good morning. Really pleasure to be here. It's been quite a journey in the development of the work on California Avenue. I thought it would be helpful just to touch base on kind of the engagement that's happened to date. You know, the starting place on this effort really was the council action in November of, 2023, when they approved the contract for Urban Field Studio to do the work for the visioning for the Cal Avenue car-free streets planning work. And part of that scope of work is to look at outdoor dining guidelines, which we're now calling outdoor activation, and also signage and branding. So in thinking about what was needed for that work, we got started in earnest really in February of last year, and we were having monthly meetings with the Cal Avenue merchants. And in that process, we kind of went through and did a whole series of like visual preferences to find out signage issues and needs, and to, obviously walk to the site, met with many business owners just to look at what the needs and issues are for signage. And then based on that, developed 3 different concepts for how signage could be done. And then we did a whole public engagement process around feedback on those different concepts, which included community meeting. We had an online meeting. But basically we did a lot of work. We had a third Thursday community open house, but we did a very extensive survey where there was over 930 people who responded to the survey to help get some idea of people's visual interests and preferences on that. And then based on all that feedback, we worked with Urban Field Studio to develop this signage program. And so I'm gonna just go through kind of the details of that. And then I'm gonna also talk about the sort of outdoor activation work that's been done. This material was presented to City Council on February 3rd as part of a study session, and updating council on progress was made with California Avenue. And then I'm sure you're aware that on the 10th of this month, the council took an action to permanently close California Avenue as a car-free street and designated as a community street. That's the designation now in the comprehensive plan, which limits vehicle traffic on the street and helps support pedestrian and bike activity on the street. So that decision's been made. And also just to know that construction of near-term improvements has started this week on Cal Avenue. And that includes replacing all the temporary barriers. So there's going to be bollards, decorative paving, kind of color stamp asphalt paving, planters, and a little bit of some signage work. They'll be done with that, and some bicycle lane markings will be done at El Camino, Ash, and Birch Streets. And that work's underway now, and that'll be finished in by the end of April. So I'm very excited about the progress that's happening on the Car-Free Streets program as a whole. We go to the next slide. I think I'm sure you went through the staff report. What we had in that report was attachments, which was the signage program. This slide presentation is really brief. It just summarizes kind of the highlights of what's in that. I'm happy to answer questions and hear feedback on the program itself. But basically what we needed to do is to figure out what really should be the place identity for Cal Avenue. Right now there wasn't anything that really had been established that sort of said, what is it when you arrive that defines the character of the place? So we went through, and that process led to the selection of modern optimism. That's what we're calling it, as a kind of basically brand identity. I'll go through the elements of that. But the other part that was important is we after assessing all of the wayfinding and signage needs for California Avenue, we thought it would be best to put together a wayfinding plan and to create templates for different sign types that are needed to help meet the navigational needs for people who are coming and visiting California Avenue. So I'm going to just walk through the kind of main elements of that. In working with our consultants and the feedback that we got from merchants, we looked at what really need to be the elements of a brand identity. And it's really these 5 elements. What's the logo? Basically, what's the typeface and character of that? What taglines do you have, which basically help identify the destinations that are part of the environment? And then what do we do about sign shapes, sizes, scale, pattern, and color? And so those are the elements. Then that right there, what you're seeing there is really the palette of the elements that create the brand identity. And in the attachment to the staff report, it goes in more detail around how they were derived and their elements. The next slide, please. What I think is really exciting about this, and I think very refreshing about where we landed on this, is that these design templates, they're not the final design of the signs, but they're basically templates for how you can go about creating a sign program. And so they're modular. They have different panels that can be interchanged depending on where they are and what the need is. They're flexible in terms of how they can be structured and organized. And they're very context-based. And so we identified a key set of signs. The first one, kind of basically maybe from right to left, is a blade sign. That blade sign, it was designed to replace the existing Cal Avenue sign that's at El Camino and Cal Avenue. I'm sure you've seen it. It's that concrete sign with sort of pebbles that kind of slope up to it. I think there's been a opinion of many folks that it's a bit dated and doesn't really represent kind of the identity of California Avenue. So what could be done to replace that? So that's that sign. We can talk about that in more detail, the characteristics of that. And that's part of the current capital improvement program. That's a funded project, so we can actually want to implement that as soon as we can. The next sign over is really what we're calling placemaking or destination signs. These are a whole series of banners that can help line along the existing light fixtures that are on the street that can change depending on events and activities and seasons. But I think and then the next sign over is a directory sign that we've been looking at when you arrive, and I'll talk about the navigation in a minute, to have signs that are able to help people navigate where to go on the street. And there's a lot that's part of that with a map, and then organizing the different types of destinations, whether it's public art, shopping, dining, play, activities. So it makes it easy for people to know where they are and how to find them. There's nothing, the ones that are there now, I think there's not enough really there to help people know that. But the kind of core part really of these, what I call pedestrian directory signs, they're sort of small, medium, and large, and very small. But they're really designed to be responsive to the distance a viewer would have in order to be able to see the sign, to know where and how to navigate. And that really, the medium and large signs are really for in the parking areas that are on Sherman and Cambridge Street to help identify how to arrive at being able to go through the pedestrian ways that get you to Cal Avenue. And then there's also what we're seeing is sort of a large gateway sign, and I'll get to that in just a second. Next slide. So on the wayfinding, the one of the first issues that came up in working with the merchants is, I would say, a frustration that with the temporary closure of California Avenue, people didn't really know how to arrive at Cal Avenue, how to get to parking, and then from parking, how to get to the car-free part of the street. We got an encroachment permit with Caltrans and did temporary signage, which is out there now. And then, but the main thing we were looking at is that, and that's helped to get people to know that there's parking access on Sherman and Cambridge. And we're completing the encroachment permit process with Caltrans now to complete the improvements at the California Avenue intersection. But right now the signal's been changed and there's new crosswalks that have been in place there now. And there'll be some additional signage about no left turn southbound. So I think all those things will help, but the orange signs that are out there now really help direct people to Cambridge and Sherman to get to parking. And that addressed the first issue that the merchants had. The next issue they had was really, let's stay, don't move yet. The next one was, is there any place identity? When you come to California Avenue, how do you say, I'm here and what is it? And you see that like in San Pedro Square in San Jose, for example. I mean, there's a lot of places where they've done significant monument signs to help identify a commercial district. So there was really a desire to do that, how to do that. And we'll talk about those three options in a second. And then when you look at the map, and you can see it in the staff report and in the attachments, those kind of small, medium, large pedestrian scaled signs really are to help people orient when you're in the parking area, how to find the pedestrian access from parking to Cal Avenue. One of the things that's great about California Avenue is it has the alley system. It has Jacaranda, it has Mayfield, it has parking off of Cambridge, it has structured parking, it has a new parking garage on Sherman. So it's pretty easy to park there. There's really not a parking problem like there was pre-pandemic, especially at lunchtime. So people arrive, but then we want to make sure they know how to get to the car-free portion of California Avenue or to California Avenue in general. So those signs are to help do that. Once you get onto Cal Avenue, we wanted to have directional signs, not only directional, but the directory signs so people can know what's offered there and the placemaking signs. So that's what we've done for navigation. Those are the sign types and these are the locations for where they are, and that's the purpose for them. And then on the gateway sign, these three we have here below, there are three ideas that were developed. Initially there was like, just put a giant sign that crosses the entire street up as high as you can and figure out what to do about how to use that as an identifier. I think that this typeface on a sort of horizontal band, which also has the tagline on, I think is pretty compelling. I think having the sort of vertical mast on one side going up higher to be able to have some of the placemaking elements that we've talked about, I think is also very good. It's a little constrained. It has to be high enough for emergency vehicle access. It's got to be no less than 13 feet, 6 inches. And then it can't conflict with the existing signal pole that's there. So there's some tensions around how to do that. So that's that sign. And then, the other part is that we've been looking at, and you'll see this with the near-term improvements, is that part of the street closure is closing because at the entrance of California Avenue, you have a median on the street. Okay, so you have, on the right, you have the lane that takes you in, and then on the left, you have the lane that takes you out. That's how it was originally operating. Well, now the planters are going to be located and bollards in such a way as to really eliminate vehicle access. But thank you, you can point to that. But the bollards are on the left side of the street as you look at that. There'll be 2 bike lanes that are there. They're retractable, so they're key operated for emergency vehicles or allow service access in there. But from really the planters over to the right, it's really closed to vehicles. So the second alternative is kind of a little more summer campy like. It's just having the sign, actually the overhead sign, over the part where you really get to have primary access, which is really for bicycles. Pedestrians can go throughout, but also for service and emergency vehicle access. Sort of differentiate sort of access versus placemaking. And then we're looking in these different alternatives that we're developing, how to activate the other space without, by removing by introducing public and placemaking items that can happen in that part of the street that's no longer needed for access. The third alternative, a ground-mounted monument sign, that really could be in the center of the street. And it allows, what's interesting about that is it's low enough or allows visibility to see down the street. That's been something people have been really interested in. Like when you look at the street, can you see the activity on the street? So it's low enough to not block being able to see that, but it's broad enough to be able to really say California Avenue, because one of the issues that came out around this sign in particular is that it can't just say Cal Ave. Merchants really wanted to say California Avenue because it's announcing both the destination and the street itself. And then that would help define where public access is for bikes versus where you have for placemaking. So that's kind of the program in terms of that. And that's as far as I'm going to go on kind of outlining the signage program to kind of keep this at a higher level. And I know if you have questions, we have more discussion about that. So we go to the next slide. Yeah. So these next few slides are about outdoor activation. And, I think mentioned this in the staff report. I think what's really special about California Avenue and its closure as being a car-free street is that you don't have the anxiety, tension, burden, and just vigilance that you need to have when you're in a street environment that have cars, right? So you're not going to have the noise, you're not going to have the air pollution, you're not going to have the clutter, you're just not going to have the presence of all those things. And, that's clearly going to be a much more attractive environment to be in. And there'll be no parking. And one of the first things that needs to happen on that street really is the resurfacing of the paved asphalt part of the street to remove all of the traffic markings, the lane markings, the bus only, the right turn lane, to remove all those things, including all the marks for parking. And so once you do that, you don't have the frame of reference that you have like on University Avenue for a parklet program. There's no need to use parking and the shape of parking to constrain how you do outdoor activation. And at the same time, because it's a completely open environment, we had to really rethink how do you organize the street in order to be able to create zones for outdoor dining or outdoor activation so that you can really, as a business district, as a commercial district, as a commercial destination, to really leverage and maximize the opportunities for commercial use of the public right-of-way, the street and the sidewalk. So there are kind of two parts to doing this. Part is how do you reorganize it for car-free mobility? We have to have emergency access. The council's vision and direction is to be able to have a slow two-way bike lane down the center of the street. That's what they've asked for. So we're looking at how to accomplish doing that. What do you need to do to support businesses so they can really utilize this space and make high quality investments now with the permanent closure of the street? And then what do we do to really enhance the community experience to make it a really fun, attractive place to be that's not just for shopping and dining, but a place for everyday experience and everyday destination. So in thinking about that, there's certain elements of the cross section of the street that we've been looking at. The frontage zones, which are in the face of the building, faces of buildings where people come directly in and out of them. That's a typical area that you want to really focus on. And we saw that in the previous application, the utilization of the frontage zone. 8-foot pedestrian ways. Council direction was really explicit about wanting to make sure that there was direct pedestrian access to the front of buildings. So we're definitely taking that direction into consideration. I have a street furniture zone, which is where you have trees, landscaping, and other things, but that zone can be used for commercial use. And then an activity zone. So that's kind of how we're conceptually thinking about the street. So, and this would be true whether it's the existing street where you have the large sidewalks of varying depth, or whether you do adapt the street where you modify some of the roadway or the sidewalks to create zones that are level, or whether you reimagine the street and you look at how to have a continuous pedestrian environment that has the same level across the street. So can we do the next one? So, in thinking about how you divide up the street, we had to take a different look at it. There's 30 buildings that are on California Avenue from Birch to El Camino. And we realized we really need to think about setbacks based on building needs, fire, life safety needs, emergency egress needs. So when you have any one building, we're looking at how do you reserve those spaces, and then those zones, 8 feet also allow for pedestrians who are walking down the access zone of the street to be able to access other buildings without having a continuous environment of that would obstruct them from being able to do that. So it increases and maintains accessibility to all the different uses. So we're doing that. And then the other thing is that with the direction from council about looking at having outdoor dining establishments sort of really focused on the frontage of their establishment, and then looking at the limitations around that. But also these activity zones, looking at how to have them used for multiple things. And one of the things that's really important in thinking about the design of the street is how to support the Sunday Farmers Market, which has about 80 stalls there now. And, in talking with Andrea there, they see the farmers market as the most diverse, highest quality offerings of a farmers market in Northern California. And they really like that. And a lot of people are interested in being here as a vendor. So, we're doing what we can. We're looking at how do we balance that out. And the activity zone is an area where the farmers market can be used. So there's a lot of different things that can take place in that zone. Next slide. So when we look at the layout of this, and this is sort of foundational to thinking about the vision of the street. The existing condition is really just have the emergency access setback, which is respected pretty much with business owners, but outdoor dining pretty much extends however far a business wants to do that based on their informal way of setting it up, agreements they have with the retailers or their business or the building owner. But it's kind of extends in a lot of different ways. And then what we're looking at now is how do you create these sort of access zone, activity, furniture, pedestrian frontage zones, and then setbacks based on building access needs and tenancy. And so it's the way we're going to look at how to restructure this. And this would apply to the existing street or reimagining the street and reconfiguring it in such a way that you had some continuous pedestrian environment apply to both. Next. So we've mapped that out along the street. And what's being shown here is outdoor dining in pink, and then sort of retail merchandising in blue. But the retail merchandising areas really are also for use with the farmers market. And so we've been looking at how to do that in such a way as to maintain 80 stalls or so in doing that. Now, I'm not going to go through this block by block and building by building, but we can certainly answer any questions you have. But we've shared this with the merchants. We had a meeting with them just the other week and went through all this, and we've started having, it's like 2 weeks ago. Now we're having individual meetings with property owners and merchants to get their feedback on this and see what their interests and needs and concerns are around doing that. But I think what happens is that when you do this, there's some locations where it's very apparent that the existing curb, sidewalk, and planter configuration that was designed for automobiles completely does not meet the needs for outdoor dining and activation. And so in thinking about adapting the street, these two alternatives, adapting the street and reimagining, we're going through a process of identifying where all those areas are and what kinds of improvements might be needed in order to be able to help support outdoor activation and sort of an early action. So we're in process with doing that. The next slide just shows the other part of the street, really from Ash to Birch Street. And I'm happy to answer questions about this. I think that what's interesting about this part of Cal Avenue is that the street's already been raised up to sidewalk level. So like in front of Zorene's, for example, it's already flush. And they have these stones that are out there as sort of the parking barriers. But Public Works had removed all of the traffic curb elements that are used to help prevent cars from going forward because of the tripping hazard. So there's been a few things that have been done, but that area is sort of a unique part of the street. So that's pretty much what I wanted to present. I wanted to kind of walk you through kind of those elements. Where we are now is we're putting together guidelines and standards for what we're calling outdoor activation. We want to go back to council hopefully in June, at least with a draft or a report back on that. And that would be enacted through a resolution or ordinance. So it would basically be similar to like the outdoor parklet program, for example, it'll be a regulatory document that will enable outdoor activation to take place. So we're working on that. And then just on the next steps for signage, we need to put together basically a program proposal, which defines what it is the whole thing is, and then put together an implementation timeline. And part of that's going to be figuring out how to integrate that into the city's CIP program so we can actually figure out how to budget and implement that. And then we'll see what the time will need to be for the implementation of that. So I'm here. I want to answer any questions you have. I'm really looking forward to your feedback. So I'm going to stop there and thank you for your patience as I took the time to walk through all that.
Thank you, Bruce. I will say that is a tremendous amount of work. We did review this a couple days ago at our pre-hearing meeting, and it's hats off. It's a huge amount of work you guys have undertaken so far. From my understanding, this is kind of our one review session that we have with you, I believe. This has been ongoing since 2022, from my understanding on the dates. And at this point, it's basically our main goals are to really sort of focus on any sort of minor comments or overall thoughts, I guess, on it. So if it's all right with the board, I have a couple thoughts I'd like to kick off, if that's okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. The whole reason OSMA's here is public comments. I'd like to open the floor for public comments, and we have OSMA Thompson here, former ARB member, and her delightful mini-me. So if you want to take a few moments, thank you. And please state and spell your name for the record.
Wow. Hi, guys.
Nice to see you again.
All right. So my name is Osma Thompson. That's spelled O-S-M-A.
Get it.
Thompson. I used to be on the architecture review board, and I was on the ad hoc committee for this particular project. I think starting maybe in 2002 and then into 2003. And when my baby was born, we let that stepped away for a bit. But I'm just here to give some feedback on what we have in front of us. I appreciate you guys giving me some time. I'm gonna try and hurry here.
No, you take your time. And it's a lot of information to digest, and I really appreciate you managing to get down here with little one in tow. So thank you.
She's got a nap time, so we're gonna jet after this. All right, so yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the community feedback. And as a community member, I was also able to take that survey after baby was born, so it was nice. When I saw the packet, I was actually hoping to see a hybrid scheme that brought together what the community liked in each scheme, given that it was so evenly distributed across the three schemes. I was kind of hoping to see something that was sort of a derivative of that. But the scheme chosen, I think I remember, was also, out of the three, my preferred. But I do have several comments, since I think there's a little bit more to do before I think it's ready. The first is the shifty dynamic baseline, so the bouncing of the letters. I understand it's intentional, but upon looking at it, it actually looks unintentional. Maybe it's just the architect in me. But I think maybe there's a way to tone it down. I think maybe it bounces too much. It's more like a very heavy dribble, but maybe if it's kind of like shifting up just the letter A or every fifth letter or something, like where maybe it's just one or two bounces instead of it being quite intense, it might look a bit more intentional than unintentional. The font also I like the precedent of the twist and shout precedent, but those letters have a bendiness that's actually not in the font. And then they also have a thick and thin element, and it might be nice to play with that. So maybe like the AVE, the AV might be thinner. Yeah. And the cal might be thicker. Something to think about, just an idea. The terrazzo pattern doesn't read like a terrazzo pattern. If I didn't know that that was the precedent, I wouldn't know that that's what that's supposed to be. It kind of harkens a little sort of like desert cross-section or something like sediment, which doesn't feel appropriate in Palo Alto, since we're not really a desert climate. So I might recommend exploring another pattern, maybe celebrating trees, just something maybe like reworking the upscale contemporary pattern. That might work for this scheme. There was also a striation pattern arch in the same, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. The striation pattern and arch in the scheme that seems to have been lost. And there's also a planter in the contemporary, upscale contemporary thing that looks cool. It might be nice to include that. But otherwise, the general color palette is nice. I like the focusing of the blue motifs in the smaller signs. Okay, so that's that for the signage. And then for the outdoor zones feedback, I recommend coloring the bike lanes so that bicyclists know that that's for them. I also think in terms of circulation, there is a lot of circulation, and in general, it might be nice for the pedestrians to actually be in the center, and then you can make more space for stuff with the storefronts. The storefronts might want to have a pathway that goes through their thing, but it seems like it's maybe too much circulation and, ooh, dear.
She's got it under control. I like it. And don't feel rushed. As a former board member, we can choose to give you extra time. So we're doing that.
Thank you. I'm almost there. Yeah, so that's just an idea. And I think I was expecting to see a little bit more detail on what types of activities are happening on each block, but I did read that that is the next step. I did have a question about what happens to the access lane when it comes to the median at the intersection of Birch and Cal Ave. Might make sense. I think I remember there being some discussion to justify it to one side. And then I also wanted to inquire if there are any plans to raise the road to meet the sidewalk. I think that would help it feel more car-free. The plan in itself still feels like a vestige, with sort of spaces for angled parking denoted. And I know that the intention is not to be like a parklet, but the way that it's set up right now, I think it still feels like it is. So I might recommend, breaking that up a little bit and having more fun with the space in that sense. And that's all my feedback for now. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you so much for making it down here and for providing feedback, and especially having your history on this project and being on the ad hoc. It's incredibly helpful and very insightful. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Nice to see you.
much. Good to see you guys.
Are there any other public comments?
No, just the one.
Okay. All right. At this time, questions to the public speaker. If anyone had any questions for Ms. Thompson before she runs away. No, just want to say thank you again. And then questions to the applicant. So I have a few, but I'd like to let someone else get started. So questions to the applicant.
You can jump in. I have a couple of questions.
Please go ahead.
There was about the directory sign. I read in the report that, at least in directional signs, the intent is not to have every, a store or restaurant named, because then there's the upkeep concern. But it looks like at least at several key locations, the directory sign is intended. So just curious, how does that get maintained as, stores change or names change?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. One of the challenges we're having on Cal Avenue is Cal Avenue doesn't really have a organized, functioning merchants association. So the city takes the role of inviting businesses to come and convene them, and then we meet with them. But in most places where you have main streets and you have main street programs that have been introduced to really help market and promote and really fill out the tenant mix, you have an organization to do that. We're trying to cultivate that. I think the directory sign really is under the purview of what a merchants association would actually be having the responsibility for managing and doing. And so that's our goal, is to help to cultivate that as opposed to the city doing that. So if we're successful, then you'll see that happen more regularly. So I think that that will define the limits on what can be done with those signs. If the city's going to be responsible for implementing that, then you're going to have more infrequent updates on those signs. But that's all to be worked out. So right now we're just trying to establish there's a need and a strategy for being able to address it.
Thank you for that, because yeah, we'd hate to see, you know, stickers placed on top to replace names kind of things. The other question I have, which Asma brought up as well, regarding the planting areas, the angled parking, vestiges of that. Is there a plan to readjust them to have little, you know, more of organized planting areas that do not have the shape of the angled parking left over?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the next phase or next step in our process is we're doing these space allocation studies, and we're going to do community outreach in April to get feedback on that. But basically, and we presented this at council, we were framing up two different alternatives that are in the scope of our consultants' work. One is to adapt the street, and the other one to be reimagining it. When you reimagine it, you would start from scratch. You won't have any traffic or parking markings. When you adapt the street, the question is what should remain or what should change? And so we're working on that. I think the goal would be to minimize any curbs or planters or configurations of that edge such that it would create a constraint on the vibrancy and the use of the street. And as you can see, when you look at it, there's a lot of places it's very obvious it's not helpful. So we're going to need to kind of identify all those and then figure how we want to adapt it. Now, so that's the intent on wanting to do that. I mean, you know, part of how we're looking at this is we're looking at what the improvements are and what they cost, and then what benefit are you getting for the amount that it's going to cost to do that? Because I think that there's been a lot of projects that have happened in Palo Alto, and I've participated in some of those, like the Dream Team, for example, which come up with a really great vision for, you know, what to do about University Avenue and the Caltrain station, and then it gets the comp plan, and then it doesn't get implemented because it's too expensive. So what we're trying to do is look at how do you create a program where you can make improvements over time to ultimately eliminate everything that's on there that has any vestige of driving or car related infrastructure. Because the street was really rebuilt in 2016, it's a very engineered street. It's like engineered to the 100th of an inch, and it has new drainage, and so it's very complex to figure out actually how to adjust all of that stuff. So it has kind of an added burden to try to figure out how to eliminate it. But we're looking at that, and that's what we're doing.
One last question is about lighting, because right now it's lit up in a way that you would light roadways, whereas pedestrian walkways, you know, have smaller scale lighting. And right now for the restaurants, like the lighting's kind of on them, right? So individual outdoor dining areas are lit up differently. Is there a plan or another, you know, layer to this that also addresses kind of a cohesive lighting plan?
Yeah. You know, that is a big opportunity to think about how to redo the lighting on that street. And, you know, we're starting to explore that. I think that the output of this effort is to really, it's kind of a combination of sort of vision with preliminary costs in it. And so it's not going to be a complete redesign of the street. This is like a urban design planning exercise. So it's about setting intentions around those things. We don't have anyone on board who would be able to figure out how to design all the lighting for the street, but being able to set the intention on creating a pedestrian lighted environment would be great. So, I mean, I think it's definitely part of what we're looking at. Yeah, I think that it's great to hear from all of you about things you think should be incorporated or be helpful elements or opportunities that should be considered in thinking about this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, even if it's a kind of as a master plan level that gets incorporated over time. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions on the gateway signs. So for the three options, it seems like they are all in different sizes, especially the third one is much smaller compared to the other two. So is there any restrictions on the width of the third option? Like, I know,
No, there's no restrictions on any of them. I
okay,
think that the direction we gave our consultants was based on all the conversations that they were participating in with the merchants. It was really clear there needed to be some creative thinking about what to do about a gateway sign.
mhm,
And so there were like 9 different ideas, and we kind of needed to boil it down to sort of 3 directions that were uniquely divergent from one another. So, I think that, but yeah, no, there's the constraints I mentioned are really the main ones, emergency vehicle, height limit. The other thing I think is important is the size of the lettering. And their readability on El Camino for a vehicle traveling at 30 miles an hour. And when you're at the intersection, the Wells Fargo sign across the street actually is pretty good in terms of the legibility size when we went out there. So you really want to have letters that are, no less than really 18 inches high or so. That's kind of that's a constraint in terms of you can't make it too small, you can always make it bigger.
like for the option 1, is there any thoughts about the structure, the supporting system of this full width to supporting this sign, or is quite conceptual now?
This is, I would say, it's very conceptual. It's really a graphic design proposal for how to do the signage. It's not been engineered,
Okay.
So the wind loading,
Yeah.
we were dealing with wind loading with Caltrans on trying to remove signs that are on there, and they have 100-mile-an-hour wind load conditions now that they have in their designs. It's like, what are going to be the standards? We didn't even touch that. So, that sign, if something like this were to be developed, we would need to, talk with different sign fabricators and go through kind of a bidding and design process to figure out what's needed for that. Yeah.
Okay, and another question is on packet page 102, is the placement of wayfinding signs.
Yeah.
There are different symbols for different types of signs.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if we put that in the appendix. I don't know. We have to see. I don't think it's in the
yeah,
appendix.
my question is for the directory cabinet, there are 4 green boxes, green squares there. One
Yeah.
is bigger and the other 3 are smaller. So are they indicate different sizes or they're still the same size?
I think they're all the same size.
Okay, so there will be 4 directory cabinets in total along the street.
Yeah, that's the initial proposal for that. Yeah.
Okay, and follow up on board member Adcock's comment for the replacement of the tenant name. So have you considered using the digital screen?
Yes, that's been brought up several times for being able to do that, and that absolutely could be a choice to explore.
Okay, and another question is for the related to comments that Osman mentioned about the terrazzo pattern. So I know in the package you show an image of. My question would be, what's the scale of the pattern? I know there is an image in the packet showing what's the real terrazzo is and what the pattern is.
Yeah, what we had the consultant do is provide us with templates, and in the branding template there are a pattern template, which can be scaled however big or small. So there's no kind of intentional grain for it. I think it depends on what it is and where you apply it. I mean, if you're doing a banner sign, it might be a little bigger, because you see it from farther away. If you're working on the directory sign, it might be really small. I mean, there's no specification on that.
Thank you. That's my question for now.
If we don't mind continuing down the line, I'd like to jump in here with a few questions. On packet page 101, looking for the many pedestrian paths, it shows the car-free Cal Avenue as having that terrazzo pattern on it. Is that actually the intention to paint that portion of the street or to do some type of paving element to that portion of the street to make it colorful?
Remember that is a graphic design convention for a directory map. It's not a proposal for improvements on the street. That said, when there's a lot of things about it that are very charming in thinking about having that on a street. So, I mean, I think that's a real possibility. When in looking at the adaptive street concept, some of the things are, how do you designate what's pedestrian and what's bike? And kind of the way we're thinking about it is to not do green bike lanes, because that sort of implies the standardized sort of, speed limit, but to think about how to color the pedestrian areas so that they're uniquely defined. And certainly patterns could be incorporated in that. They don't have to be sort of rigid things that have been used in a lot of communities for defining pedestrian ways, like continental crosswalks and things like that. So yeah, but if that's something you think is compelling and interesting, I think it's something worth us looking, exploring.
Okay, great, thank you. 2 questions about signage. I didn't see any signage placed on El Camino Real. So when you're coming from the south heading north on El Camino, you can turn either right onto Sherman or you can pass California Avenue and turn right onto Cambridge. So would there be 2 signs on El Camino to indicate those 2 potentials to get to the parking lots? And on the same note, when you're heading southbound on El Camino, you can only turn on Cambridge. If you miss it, you can't turn left on Sherman. You'd have to make a U-turn at Page Mill to get back and then be able to turn right on Sherman or Cambridge. So again, would there be signage on El Camino indicating that they would sort of need to turn on Cambridge to find those parking spaces?
Yeah, it's a really great question. We have an encroachment permit that's permitted us to put signs up that are there now that provide direction for that. They're orange signs, they're not. So what we heard from Caltrans was that when there's a decision for the permanent closure of the street, which has happened, then we can have a discussion about how to replace what those signs are. Now, when we then get into the municipal uniform traffic control device guidance around the types of signs that you can use. So we don't have quite the same flexibility because we're the public right of way. If we were on private property, then we could put commercial signs in. So it's a bit of a question about how we want to do that. And we don't have an answer yet on that. So it's a great question. I think having permanent signage that doesn't look like construction signage would be a good idea. But that's something we need to figure out how to do that.
Okay, great. I think I've got 2 smaller questions and that's it. So with the emergency egress access coming in from El Camino and going straight down the street, it does look like there's not really an exit. So would they have to turn around to come back out? So if they went straight down to Birch, it does look like, if you don't mind pulling up the screen that showed the blue and the red boxes, so it should show the activation points on the street. If we can get there, then I can show you what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly this one, but the next one that shows Birch. Perfect. So I'm going to draw on the screen here. One second. Okay. So if that emergency egress is coming this way, can they turn out this direction? Or would they have to come this way? Or is there the possibility to go that way? And it looks like this one's too tight. So I don't think that's the option here. So the question would be, how would that emergency egress vehicle get in and out on the other end?
Yeah. All 3 intersections at Birch, Ash, and at El Camino have retractable bollards that facilitate emergency egress in and out. So, you would be able to drive in at El Camino, drive all the way down and drive back out on Birch if you wanted to do that as an emergency vehicle. Or you can do the other way, or you can drive in on Ash. So yeah,
Perfect.
all three locations have retractable bollards.
Perfect. And then, if you don't mind, go back to the previous slide that we were just looking at. Okay. So my question is sort of in regards to this blue space here, if that's, covered with chairs and tables in an emergency situation, we obviously wouldn't have time to pull those in and pull those out. So my 2 cents would kind of be along the lines of maybe that needs to be left open and
Right.
that's where the bollards are so that there's, a constant emergency egress. And then, but this side obviously is a little bit too narrow anyway. So I would just, my 2 cents on that is that this blue is a little concerning to me because in an emergency situation, we're not going to be folding up umbrellas and
Right.
putting tables and chairs away. On a similar note, and part of that is, so in Los Angeles, there's 3rd Street Promenade, which is the one I was trying to think of on Tuesday, and I had to look it up. And they have a nice sort of loading and unloading zone. And one of the thoughts is that El Camino is very busy, right? It's not really a good place for people to be dropping off pedestrians. But if you go back to the Birch slide, that may be a possibility where there's just a little inlet here, and then maybe there really is. And again, the bollards could still be there, emergency egress still there, but there may be the possibility for like a meeting point, something like that, where it's like if you have an Uber dropping you off, maybe that's the drop-off point, or maybe that there's, if anyone's, working in this area and there's a DoorDash situation, that just accounting for something where there's a temporary limited time vehicle drop-off pickup situation. So has that been considered at either of these points?
Yeah, I think, well, on Birch Street, we're looking at that.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, there's definitely a need for pickup, drop off, Uber, Lyft, and ADA parking.
Perfect. Okay.
So on Ash Street, I don't have that here as a slide in this presentation, but the configuration at Ash there's two, along the line where the frontage of the buildings are, if you sort of extend that imaginary line on that, in the center of the street, there'll be 2 bollards that are retractable, and then there'll be planters on either side of that. But on the Ash Street side of that, there'll be, colored, clay colored stamped asphalt like you have the existing crosswalks that'll be underneath that. But there's 2 ADA parking spaces. They're ADA sort of pickup drop-off spaces. They're not actually parking spaces. They're going to be sort of drive-in to, and then there's going to be a 16-foot fire zone that's got to be clear. But that clear zone could be used for ADA access for people getting in and out of vans and things like that. So there'll be 2 ADA spaces that'll be at the end of the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I believe that's all my questions for now. I do also, I hate to do this, but we are at a time point of 10:30. So I'd like to get the last 2 comments in. If you guys are willing to wait until after a quick break, that may be helpful. Are you guys okay with that? All right, so let's take a quick, apologies, but let's take a quick 5-minute break and regroup at around, say 10:35-ish, 10:36-ish. All right, thank you. All right, we are back in session. Thank you guys for the extended delay there. It's now 10:41. Appreciate that. And moving back on to Peter and David, would like to hear your questions.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to understand, Mr. Vichuki, what the scope of what the real changes are going to be. What I'm looking at is a really elegant and thorough graphic presentation of sort of an idea where you think it should go, great outreach with the community about getting it all in the right direction. And it's truly impressive. What I don't understand is what we're actually going to change on Cal Avenue, because I see from the El Camino entrance, the traffic light is still there and it looks ridiculous next to the arched banner. Is the plan to take that out? I see the curbs up and down the street, the remnants from the traffic. And like you said, in 2016, they had this huge public works project to rebuild that street. Is the plan to redo all of that? Or what I'm hearing you say is that we have to be very careful of the budget and we really can only do small things.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, we're developing 2 design alternatives right now. And so we're in process of doing that. So once those are developed, I think it'll be very clear to see what would change. This set of diagrams right here is sort of one of the first steps in thinking about how to transform the street. One of the first things we need to really figure out is how do we really accommodate outdoor dining in a way that really works for businesses to advance the commercial use of the street. So this creates a framework for that part of it. The next part, which we're doing now, is introducing how do you do bike lanes on the street. And then we're looking at how do you allocate the space on the street. And this street's really complex in terms of all the different competing needs that are on the street. So in our next round of outreach, we're going to lay that out so people kind of see how you layer out all the different components that define what's possible to change on the street. And then we're looking at it 2 different ways. Are there a series of adaptations that can meet all the objectives, you know, that council has stated, and both help the economic development and really help community experience, really create the sort of social environment that is the possible thing? Or do we really need to completely reimagine the street and think of it as an entirely new thing? And then based on that, how would you use the street? So we're going to have these 2 different alternatives with the basic sort of very preliminary cost, have some range of what it is. And then we'll go back to council and say, look, this is sort of what we found. You know, if you're going to adapt the street, this is sort of one set of improvements. If you're going to reimagine it, this is it. This is how it functions. And this is community sentiment about the things that they would like to see. And these are merchant opinions about what they think they need in order for it to be successful. What direction do you want to provide around how to advance it? And when we met in February 3rd on the study session, you know, Keith Reckdahl, for example, and Pat Bird and Ed, all we're talking about, is there a way to maybe evolve the street so that, you know, you can start with adaptations, but then can that lead to being able to achieve reimagining the street? And so that's a question which we're trying to fund an answer for. So
I think your wisdom and some of the council members are all understanding that just the overall rebuilding may well just be a fruitless exercise because that's a hugely expensive process.
Yeah.
So then my question comes around, what I'm seeing is a fairly detailed sign program. And it seems to me like we're looking hard to execute that because we probably can fit that in the budget.
Yeah.
But then the hard question, is that really the right thing to do? When we don't know what bigger changes we might be making, should we be putting in this level of detail and comprehensiveness on a sign program?
Yeah.
So how do you justify doing the signs first?
Okay, so the way we're looking at it is it's an iterative process. We started with the signs because we were able to pretty accurately define what that could be in terms of the aesthetics, character, and function of it. And so now we're going through the outdoor dining, we go through bikes, we go through activation, we look at public improvements. We're going to look at all different users and ways that help attract them to have California Avenue be like an everyday destination. Like, do you want to ride your bike and spend time there, not just to shop or dine, but what are the things that help attract you to do that? When we kind of get through that cycle, Then we kind of go back and we look at everything that we've been putting together to say, okay, have we learned something new that would change what we've been initially thinking? So we can kind of put together kind of a summary package of what can be the transformations. And so we'll come back and we'll look at the signage. But what we want to do is advance this enough so we can actually introduce it into a capital improvement program so that can get started and not have it wait until after we've thought about the vision for the street as a whole. So that's kind of, we're kind of trying to work it both ways. It's flexible if it needs to change, but initiate as much as you can. So that's kind of how we're looking at that.
So are we planning to build these actual signs you're presenting here as physical elements in the next, say, year?
Yeah, there's two signs that are in this year's capital improvement budget. One is replacing the California Avenue sign on El Camino. So we're going to be replacing that with something along the lines of what we're showing here. And to replace add the sign that's on Oregon Expressway, that's as you come west, before you come into Birch Street, there's a sign that's there that needs to be updated. So we're going to replace both those signs. And we budgeted to do that. And now that we have this sort of direction, we can actually go out and do the next steps for doing that. So that will happen within the next year, those signs. The other signs, there's no budget or capital improvement program to implement them. So we have to put a program together to make that happen. And that would need to be approved as part of the budget. So that's kind of where we're at putting that together. So that could happen. But how soon? We'd like to see it happen as soon as possible, and so that's kind of where we are on that.
Okay, so our direction to you really ought to be focused on the sign at El Camino, because that's the one that's going to be built soon, at least.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So
The blade, the
something
vertical
to think
blade
about.
sign. Yeah.
Okay. My second question has to do with some history with this and knowledge of Councilmember Burt's involvement. He had pressed very hard many times to have some sort of outdoor stages or outdoor public entertainment areas. Is that going to be incorporated in this project?
And we've heard that comment from a lot of different people, especially from like Third Thursday, like if you're to have regular music events, what can be done to support that, including like providing electricity and things like that. So in looking at the either alternative, adapting or reimagining, that kind of programming is one of the things that can be, is anticipated as needing to be an element that would be there. Yeah, so we're looking at how to do that.
My last question has to do with comments made by a former board member, Thompson. Your report seems to say that you've settled on this, what's it called? Modern optimism as a design theme. And it seems like a well thought through thing. She alluded to the fact that when she reviewed all the questionnaires, she thought there was a much more balanced feedback. It wasn't so clearly one direction. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We look at it this way. It came out numerically, like slightly ahead. Okay. And there's kind of two parts to it. One is when you look at the upscale kind of contemporary, or you look at the artsy saloon, the amount of negativity around what was bad about it was a lot more extreme. So what people didn't like, they really didn't like, and what they did like, they did like. So for the people who like modern optimism, they really like the idea. Okay. Now that was it at this point in this decision making. Now you can see from here how much it evolved based on the feedback that we got to the set that you're looking at now. The color palette is completely different. There was a lot of adjustments like to the typeface, changed the tagline, and then looked at how to distribute that on overall signage program and changed some of the shape motifs. So there was a lot of things that changed after that questionnaire, those survey responses, in light of all the comments. There were 932 survey responses, and there were over 400 written comments that were pretty detailed about what people thought. And so we were looking at all that in addition to our comments from the merchants. So for example, like with Artsy Saloon, people love the idea of its historic references to Mayfield and the body character of Mayfield life with the saloons and drinking and all that. And so the sort of saloon door motif, people kind of really liked. They thought, oh, that's very clever. Okay, that's sort of artsy. That's kind of a great idea. But at the same time, you had people saying like, well, you know what, that's so dated, it's so Western, it's not really what Cal Avenue really feels like. And it's the colors kind of looks more like Stanford color. And, you know, it's like, which is, and some people thought was great and others thought that seemed too possessive. So you got a lot of opinions, right? But what we found is that those two other schemes, and the artsy saloon was too polarizing. It's too hard to figure out how to modify that to come to some place in the middle. People would like it. It was just too polarized. And with upscale contemporary, you know, a lot of people felt like it looked too Halloweeny, you know, like it looked too corporate. And it didn't really reflect the kind of informal, local, artsy, residential, small town neighborhood, Main Street quality that I think people are looking at. They look at that and they felt like that seems a little more business park-like in terms of how it was done. So what happens is you get these impressions on aesthetics, and we're trying to figure, okay, given all those things, how do we kind of find something that would gravitate where a lot of people would feel like, you know what, that feels pretty good, and I like that, and that's pretty good. That's where the Cal Avenue thing went. And then we got all this other feedback, which then we introduced, and that's why it's different when you look at the sign program itself. You can see how it's evolved from once the survey selection was made. And that was based on all the different feedback that we got. So I think that, you know, it's not very easy to kind of come up with an aesthetic that a community feels like represents their aspirations. But I think this has done a really, really good job of being able to do that.
Yeah, thanks for those comments on that. I guess I'll close my question with you. You've been doing this a long time throughout California. You're an expert, one of the best. That's why we have you here, I hope. And how do you get through this? Clearly, the vote seems to be pretty uniform. When I look at all those options, they all look very compelling. How do you advise a city to close on all this? You can't design by vote. So what do you do? Where do we take it from here? How do we make sure this is the right one?
Are you referring to the signage or for the design of the street?
Well, for the modern optimism direction.
Yeah.
You want to set a direction and then you really got to drive everything towards that.
Yeah.
I get that. And it's hard. It's not compelling that that's what the community chose. I hear your arguments are good. But how do you steer the city to do the right thing?
Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting. When we went to council, I think there was a lot of support for this direction. I think there were, you know, a few minor comments like the terrazzo. There were some issues, maybe a little bit about that. But you know, from a city policy point of view, you know, the big step really is to embrace what the district needs to function, and it needs the signage, and it needs an identity. And I think that there was very little outright negativity about this direction. And I think that's really powerful because it means that basically that's pretty acceptable. So I think that it's the right way to go. It's the right vocabulary of elements. You know, so I think that we kind of hit the mark on that. And I think the color palette is really great. So I think we just run with it. You know, I don't think there's what we can find that's going to be better.
Thank you.
I honestly don't have so much questions, but if we could flip into the.
Sure, let's have you start us off on comments. Thank you.
Awful lot to say here about this, but your last comment intrigued me the most. You know, if you get lots of people to talk to you about something, you get nothing in the end. And so your last comment was really rather good. I mean, I think that your last comment came from some feelings about the street rather than all of the technical issues that you have to solve along the way. And I thought that some of the questions we asked were pretty good. And actually, Peter's kind of closest to my feeling about the project. But I think there's been a lot missing here now. You know, This is a 2-block area. That's all it is. It's 2 blocks, intense, mostly eating, an intense little 2-block area. And what really has to happen is somehow rather symbolically, you have to make all of your presentation in your symbolism somewhere along the way. And I'm afraid you completely missed that one because there's got to be a life to this street, you know, another life beyond, even beyond the eating life that's the restaurants. And so when you talk about, say, making a decision out of graphics alone, which is really kind of what you did, is the optimistic, those 3 choices. And you look at the numbers, of course, I think it becomes real that it wasn't a preference really. It was only 1 of 3. And if you add up the ones who didn't choose optimistic modern, that's 535 people who, you know, who didn't. So the 330 who did, you know, really isn't. So you made a decision, then you would go with it. Fine, that's okay. Same is true of the logo, I think. You made a decision. Who around here says, let's go to California Avenue? We say Cal Ave. Everybody says that. It's standard the way. So the decision was made actually to go with Cal Ave. I think that was a great decision, whether it's slightly different. That's a graphic designer's decision, you know, and you have a graphic designer here. So go with it. I mean, I think that's a good direction for you to have a more playful street because it isn't University Avenue, it's Cal Ave, and it's got a different flavor to it. All of the people in Palo Alto, I think, know where this street is. You know, you don't really know if you're traveling along El Camino exactly, so you need to find some way to point it out. But is the best decision to put up some standards with the name spelled out on the top? I don't think so. I think I sort of come from the street up, the street life up, you know, rather than the top down. You have kind of a border to it, a bigger building and a lesser building. But so I think that you really have to deal with the graphics that way. You really have to create some sculptural element at the end of the street that comes up from it and it has Cal Ave written on it maybe 20 times. It's some big, some small, I don't know, you know, what it should be, but it's got to be done by a graphic designer. Somebody, not just a graphic designer, but maybe even a creative designer. It could be something that the art people talk about as a major piece that defines the beginning of a street with a lot of different life to it. So don't think in terms of solving all your problems all the time. Add to it the nature of it this way. Wayfaring. Good God, you don't need that much. You've got much, much too much information there for 2 streets. I just don't see it. If you have a P for parking, that's good enough. It'll get you to the parking lots. And you get it down the street as well. And you don't need to show maps of the parking. Why? A parking lot is you drive your car, you go in and you find a spot. So all you need is P. So it takes away a lot of signage. And you don't need all those perimeter signs throughout the streets and waste all the money on the signage. People know where they're going to go and they'll find out. They ask questions, where is such and such? It's 2 blocks. That's all it is 2 blocks. It's way excessive in signage, way, way, way excessive. So Veronica, could you put up the sign piece just for me for a minute? Signage, what is signage? Because I think, let's wait until we get an image up here. See this sign here on a bracket? I want to show you what it looks like. This is the kind of sign. it's got these tabs on it, right? And the tabs tie to the piece that you could attach to a pole. I show you this because it was a street improvement, you know, it was never done. We ran out of money. You got that problem too. But, you know, where should this be, this side panel? I think it should be inside of the line, you know, that you have two lines. You have a traffic line, you have the pedestrians, you have the other stuff on the side. You have a whole new line direction there. Why not use it? Why not put the signs there? If you put this if you put a fabric connect thing that you attach to the light poles, it's actually over all of the activity. It's further in because it's at the curb. It presents the existing curb kind of line. It's not where your emphasis is here. It ought to be somehow linear. And folks, you should be thinking about this. There's a lot more to be done to this street because to make it really work, it needs more thinking still. You're only really starting on this. Can't hear me. Can't hear me? Okay, sorry. Thank you, Stephen. So I would say go with the graphics that you're working with there. I mean, to say the optimistic modern, although I sort of think if you put words to it, it's more like images than it is words. Wayfaring, don't spend so much money on all of that. It's too much graphics. So the tagline, if you turn to your page 67, it's a really important page and it almost has nothing on it. So let me see, 67, let me get it to Okay, shop, dine, play. I agree, shop, I agree, dine, but what's play? What is it? You want to say what it is?
Yeah, I just, you know, we've been meeting at Gamelandia, and Barry is the owner of Gamelandia. And we had this whole conversation about what to do. And there's a really interest in being able to play and to spend time doing play things. So that's kind of where that came from.
Okay. So let me just make some other comments because could it be? And Peter referred to this a little bit. It could be listen, because it could be music. Could be watch, could be a performance. It could be relax, read a book. It could be dream, you know, if you're kind of a poet and you want to go there and you want to just see what the culture is like, because there's an awful lot of culture on Cal Ave, you know, really interesting kind of the mix of all the food types that are there. Could be exercise, you know, you could have, you can see, what is it called that you do these sort of, you know, that kind of exercise. It could be that sort of thing happening in the street because you could ask people to come down there. You know, if you think this way, you make a marketplace. You get people there, then they're shopping. So you're thinking too limited in a way. You have to think in a broader sense of what attracts people to come to this street. Not just functionally, how does the street work? Go beyond that in your imagination. So that's what I see is I just felt it's limited, that this particular shop, dine, play ought to include all those other elements in it, because that's really what's happening. So for example, what Peter was asking about, how do you work out these performance spaces? You really have to have a performance space for this block. You have to have all these other things. If you didn't spend much money, I would suggest you spend it on doing that. Then you do it in all of the signage, because you'll really get business down there if you do it that way. And then you need some other person to run the show. You need some social activity. So maybe, you know, in you're talking to the merchants, don't just ask them, tell them. In other words, tell them what's possible here for an exciting street. I just think you really need to get a program like that. If you don't want to write it yourself, then get somebody to do it for you, you know? But you need a consultant that kind of tells you how you can make the street live. Veronica, maybe we could show the second one. Yeah, so here, you know, activities. Bring your kids down and we're going to have a drawing session in the middle of Cal Ave. Bring your kids on the weekend, some ice cream treat special events, you know, and get the kids down. This one is kids singing on the side. Next one, Veronica. More, yeah. So here, you know, the street, you know, that happens on what's the name of it? What's the name of the street that we do the chalk drawings on? Tasso Street from off University. Have you all seen the chalk drawings? They're incredible. What an incredible thing, you know? And this is the stuff you need here. You don't need all of the graphics. You need this. Create the graphics on the street, clean them up the next day. Or you need an event, you know, a dress-up event like that one that's little girl on the left. You need something like that to happen as well, you know, all kinds of ages that you need to apply for, and get the families and the ages to come down and think about that as being the design of your street, really. And all the green areas that you have on the street, those are potential areas for a lot of the different things that you call play, but I'm saying they're listen, watch, play, relax, read, dream, exercise. Think about those areas. That's the way the street really will live. So get back to just general comments to wind up. I mean, that's what I think, and you mentioned the word in here, ethos. That's what it really stands for. All of the activity of the street. Not so much solving, you have to solve the fire truck, you know, you have to solve the access to the buildings, but don't make that your primary decision. For example, this street has a history. You've mentioned it, you know, the saloon type history. I think that if you want to do a graphic, do something about the history of the block. You know, what we have signage all around town about the birds and the baylands, you know, and et cetera. You've got a history here. Dig it deep, go to the history museum, you know, the history library, and get all of that, and get a graphic designer to put it together for the way they do on some of the other panels we have around town. That's the graphic that ought to be on the street, bit of the history. So I think that's pretty much my comment is what's missing is a spirit. You know, it's solving all of the problems will happen once you really have the view of the whole thing.
Thank you, David. Peter, do you want to go next?
Sure. Well, I agree with what David is saying, but I'm highly sympathetic to your job and how we pull all this together. I think clearly you're aware of and thinking about all this stuff. So I can throw out just a couple of, when we do come around to redesigning the roadway more, I had done some sketches with board member Thompson. I was also on that ad hoc committee. And it was clear to us that we wanted you to do two things. One was to curve the access way. You don't have to go straight down the middle of that street. You have a tremendous opportunity to sort of swing it back and forth and acknowledge different spaces for different places, activities, people. I just think it made sense so many ways if you get to the point where you have that infrastructure change happening to consider that. And secondly was to look into putting in real landscaping, bring greenery and life into it, and especially on Cal Avenue because all the trees were cut down and so it really needs more greenery. So those are two just sort of high level changes I would recommend that you just make sure stay on the radar as you go through all of this. Then the idea of having music performing spaces is really a wonderful way to enliven it. I would call it play, but however you choose the words for it. I've always used the eye-opening experience I had back in Jerusalem a few years ago and came across an outdoor piano. This white thing. It was a real piano and it really worked. And it was outdoors in the weather. And people just gathered around it and sang and performed. What a wonderful, wonderful way to build community and spirit and place, totally free, provided by the city. But to me, that just epitomized what we should be doing in these public spaces. And I'm sure you're aware of all this, so I don't want to sit here and try to be critical about it, but those are things I'd like to see us go.
So can I interrupt you for a second?
Of course.
Have you ever seen Flash Mob on YouTube?
No, not literally that, no.
Has anybody else? Yeah. Stephen?
I believe you're referring to like a dance flash mob,
Well, it could be dance or
Okay.
it could be symphonic or, orchestra.
like a group activation. Yeah.
It happens, that in the surprise, right? And people come walking out into a scene and all of a sudden they unpack their instrument and then they're part of this orchestra that develops or the dance. Somebody dances across or somebody's playing the piano and kids come up and ask, can I join you? And they take their violin out of the case and play. I mean, those are the events that make this place would make it really work.
That's what makes life great, David. We all know that.
The piano, you mentioned the
Sure
piano.
that, yeah. So my second set of comments is more to do then with you, Mr. Fujuki, and working through Ed Shikata's office. City Manager Shikata is a sort of very engineering-oriented, focused kind of thing, and it makes sense. It's very much throughout this document, all that is there. But what's happening because of that is that you're missing this thing that Board Member Hirsch is talking about, this sense of liveliness and spirit. And I'll be blunt, in an hour and a half of talking with you, it wasn't until I pushed you pretty hard on how you chose modern optimism that you got passionate about it and defended it.
Yes.
And that's what I think we want to see more of is you've made a design decision, defend it. Because I agree, it seems like a good choice. More than that, we just need to make choices and go forward. You've done it, you've thought about it, do it. I'd love to see in all these documents more of that. If you're going to put changes to the pavement 10 years in the future, show it now. Let me imagine it. Don't restrict me to what the engineering reality is going to be later. Don't be afraid to be bolder on the artistic, creative side of it, because what's so important is to bring everybody along with you on this journey. And you do have that passion, and I know it. You've done so many great projects around Northern California. So lead us and be bolder in your leadership, because I think we'll follow you willingly to a great solution. In that direction, out on El Camino, you're showing us the sign options. Get rid of the light pole. Don't show me the traffic light. Even though it's there, even though it's probably going to stay there, don't show it to me. Let me dream, okay, what it could be like. So with that, I'm going to give you my feedback on the actual one thing we're going to build, which is that sign out at El Camino. And I think any one of the ones with an arching banner over the top are really the way we should go. You want something that has such a strong visual presence. Just from a quarter of a mile away, you almost start to see it. So the California Avenue arched thing over the roadways would be my strong recommendation to do that. And then I think because you don't know what's going to happen underneath it, don't go across the entire road. It's clever to think you could just do it to identify the access area, but you don't know where that's going to be. So my feedback is to do something dramatically up in the air, high, big, and go across the whole road. So that's the end of my comments. Thank you very much.
And we'll just continue back down the line this way. So I'll go next. I really agree with both what Board Member Hirsch and Board Member Balte were saying. I think that also a comment that we had made in sort of the pre-hearing with Stephen was the concept of having these Instagrammable moments and these activation spaces. And again, going back to the 3rd Street Promenade, I admit I was there before Instagram was invented, so I'm aging myself a little bit here, but David. But it had this presence. You knew where you were getting dropped off. You knew where you were getting picked up. They had these fountains. They had these animal sculptures. They had these moments where you really would take photos with your friends. And even though you had no place to upload them yet, they were memories and they were these beautiful vignette moments. And I think that that's something that I would say is lacking a little bit here, where I'd love to have something a little bit more powerful in those moments. I'd love to almost see a fountain in the middle. I love this idea of a piano. I mean, again, this Instagram moments where you get somebody playing a piano in a mall, and then all of a sudden someone comes up and recommends a song. And then all of a sudden the singer that actually wrote the song walks by accidentally. Sure. But it's those wonderful moments that could really create something kind of special and kind of magical there, I think would be just great. And again, to Peter's comment, don't be afraid to dream. And then we'll just take it one step at a time on how to get there. Right. But having that big overall vision, I think is really, really powerful and really ties the community into getting on board and supporting it as opposed to just here are the signs we want to put up. On that note, just graphically, I have a couple of comments. Sorry, back to the street. I do like the idea of having a drop-off area at Birch Street, even if it's just a little outlet, pick up, drop off. I think that'd be really helpful. The lighting concept, I think, could be really powerful and something very interesting. Greenery, great idea. And having some of these, artistic moments. I think that embracing the terrazzo is pretty cool. It's one of those things that, again, I grew up here. I've been walking that street since I could walk. And that terrazzo is just a memorable piece of that street, right? And it is artsy and it is sort of quirky. And there's no place else that I can think of in Palo Alto that has that sort of unique terrazzo pattern. So I love that you guys are embracing it. On that note, however, I feel that the graphics for the terrazzo pattern are a little lacking. There's too much white, not enough sort of spotting. I'd almost say the spotting needs to be more and the white needs to be less. And that's just a graphic element that can be tweaked. But the overall concept of the terrazzo I like. It's just sort of the actual terrazzo graphic pattern itself. I feel like it needs just a little bit more refinement. I'm looking at that packet, page 71 is sort of what I keep looking at. And on that note, I know that the graphic of the map showing the spotting down the street was just a graphic, but the more we think about it, the more like relating back to the chalk design, it would be kind of cool to actually paint the street. And then on that note, instead of maybe having signs specifically everywhere, you could even let that pattern bleed out towards the parking lots. So someone picks up on, oh, there's a spot, oh, there's another spot, and then they get closer and closer together as you get closer and closer to Cal Ave. So just that sort of that terrazzo pattern sort of feeding out and actually helping with the wayfinding to bring you into the street itself. And then having that street be really alive with a lot of color on the street itself. And maybe it's as simple as painting, maybe it's more complicated than that, I'm not sure. But being able to embrace that and sort of have that percolate out a little more would be kind of nice. My last comment here is really in regards to, like Peter said, to the wayfinding sign on El Camino. I have two thoughts. I think that the low sign option 3, I guess it is. Yeah, option 3. It says gateway sign, option 1, low sign, but I guess it's just the low sign. Yeah, option 3. It's just not my favorite because it is a little lackluster. I understand it would probably be budget friendly in a way that the other two might not be. But it just isn't enough. It's not enough of a pop. Option number 2, I think it's my OCD talking. I can't stand it because it's just the one side and it feels very lopsided to me and it feels a little like, why not just embrace the whole thing? So I'm a big fan of option number 1. Again, getting a little nitpicky here, apologies. I would, again, center California Avenue, put Shop Dine Play on the left, put Palo Alto, California on the right, make it feel more balanced, make it feel more even. And again, down the line, I know this is not now, we don't need that street light except for the left turn lane. So if that could be a small, short, center fixed street light, you wouldn't need that whole big overhead one. It could be from the ground up, just in the center on that pedestrian aisle or on that center divide, and then it wouldn't need to compete with the up and overarching of the California Avenue. It could be just a smaller point, because the only thing that is needed for is to get those people to turn left, right? So I think that, again, future thinking, I understand that the budget's, a little tight at the moment, but that big arch sign or that big overhead, this is where you are, I think will be really, really powerful in a way that could be really nice. So that would be my sort of vote there. And that's all my comments for now, but really well done. Huge amount of work here, really impressive, and looking forward to it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for your great work. It included lots of information and detailed information. I think they're all great. And I agree with all the other board members said, and I think it would be nice to work closely with public arts to maybe have some interactive art installations along the street. So one thing it could make enhance the experience when people are there, they can play or do some interactivities. And for another thing, this art installations could be like a wayfinding thing. It's kind of like the landmarks, so that when people come here, they can know which direction to go. And also, I have the same feeling as David. I felt there are too many signs around the adjacent street. When people parking on the adjacent parking lots, I think it shouldn't be very hard for them to know where to go to California Avenue, but it's more about when they're along the street, which specific stores are. So in that case, I would suggest for the directory map to show all the tenants' names. So maybe the digital screen would be the option to consider. I agree with what Chair Rosenberger said, to bring some prints on the ground, to have some graphic design to lead the way. And also, I think it will also make the street more lively, and also make it clear, like where is the pedestrians ways and where is the access road. And also for the three options of the gateway, it's hard for me to choose whether option 1 or option 3 are better choices. I think they're like different directions. And for option 3, I think the benefit is it's budget friendly, and also it's human scale. So it's more Instagrammable, that people can take pictures in front of it. And also the terrazzo pattern at the base, I think it's more consistent with the other like directionary signs, because they share the same elements. And for the big arching ones, I think, yeah, it is more visible from the street, but I think it need to be developed, like how to construct it, what's the structure supporting system is. And if we go with this route, I agree we should center the California Avenue, the letters to be more on the center. And also for the base, maybe we could use the similar terrazzo pattern base for this option too. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you again for this very super thoughtful presentation. I think what all of us are getting at is the sign package is great for what it is, but we're kind of lacking what comes before it, like a master plan for how this street would get developed. And then the sign piece kind of is a part of that puzzle, right? So I think, and I understand, like, where you are and the funding and all that, there's not much you can do, but I think, like, everybody was getting at, I urge you to kind of do that initial like master planning of where's the street, where's the bike lanes, where pocket gardens, parks, music venue, all of that. And then once you do that, it seems like the number of signs that was shown in the plan is really not necessary. It's you need the marker on El Camino, which actually, like, my take is a little different in that, in any of the signs that indicate like a gateway, nobody's driving in here. It's a gateway that nobody actually uses that gateway, right? Because you're not actually going to drive in there. You're going to park somewhere else and walk in from these feeder streets, not enter from that gateway. So I think what it needs is more of like a landmark of this is where you are, not a big archway gateway to say, welcome through this big gate, right? So I think I'm actually there, I forget which page it was on, but it was like a monument blade sign. Oh, there it is. Packet page 84. I don't know how it fits into that street, but it kind of seems like what you're looking for is to mark that at the start of the pedestrian, like more fun part of the street, not necessarily a gate. So I'm not like favoring any one of the three options, but rather want you to think about like, what is it trying to do? What is that sign trying to do? And I think really that gateway and, the from Oregon Expressway, that you've already got in the budget there, that is a tired old sign that could use a refresh. The sign on at the end of Cal Ave that on El Camino, it is a tired old sign as well. So I'm happy with any of these options to replace it to something fresher, but just like, what is it doing and therefore what should it be? The other thought I had was about again, like it's not so much about signage, but even like the, what do you call it? The flags that go on the lights or somewhere else. It's really what you're trying to do is kind of graphically show something that conveys the joy of this place, right? So we don't really need directional signs with all the restaurants and whatever. It's a 2-block street. People use Google Maps or a variety of maps. Like indicating what all are there is not as essential as just adding color, joy to that place, which already does with the terrazzo and all. And that's another layer of switching it totally to pedestrian. What is that added layer of graphics that supports that and highlights that? Opposite of what David and Peter were getting at, I'm also not expecting you to do social engineering to, make people come here, and have all kinds of organized activity, because there is, as of now, there's not like a governing body or organizer who would manage all of that. But at the same time, I think dreaming of what it could be, and, as they say, like build it and they will come. But let's at least try to plan for that, and but not, not asking you to go find the vendor who's going to then organize, shows on the street, but, designing that space for what it could be. And then the sign program kind of layers on to that. But really thoughtful work. I'm like, as far as the which one of the three options, I think the one you've chosen is the strongest. And to David's point, it was not ranked choice voted, I don't think. So although less than 60% people did not, go for that one, if you had done ranked choice voting, you probably would have received more for this particular one, based on the comments that I read, that, the negativity on the other ones were higher than as a weighted way that you moved forward with that one. So I appreciate that. So thank you.
Just want to jump in here because I want to support the idea of the monument as opposed to the arch as well, because not just traffic, it's more a place where you really could have something happen. And if you change the movement, the street around it, and created more of a mass in the middle, planted as well on one side, let's say, you could get a lower level street, sort of car level, because you're looking out of your car window. You're not looking up particularly, you're looking straight ahead. And so you'll see it very powerfully in the middle of the street. I think it would be terrific to tie that with whatever happens behind it in terms of the traffic patterning and the emergency vehicles, which you obviously have to come in from El Camino. It was interesting, some of the comments about where it's going to, where the fire truck's going to turn around. There's no doubt you have to figure that one out. But at this end, I think you could do something quite different and open and close the street in the middle and make the traffic work around that and get something really strong in the middle. I suggest maybe you go talk to some of the people in the art committee there to see how you could do that, because it could well be done with some consultant work that, you know, treats that as a creative piece.
Thank you, David. All right, thank you to all the board members. I do not believe we need to vote on this at this time.
Correct. This was just a study session.
Okay, so with that, Bruce, thank you very much to you, I'm assuming you have some staff of other people working on this as well. It was a tremendous effort, and thank you very much for your presentation. It was very thorough, very thoughtful, and I guess we're all really looking forward to seeing what happens with Cal Ave in the future. So thanks very much.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, moving on to action item number 4, I believe, which is approval of minutes. Check, make sure I got that right. Yep, action item number 4, approval of minutes, draft architectural review board meeting minutes for February 20th, 2025. Do we have any adjustments, comments, items to be corrected on those minutes?
I do have one correction. I wasn't here, and I really appreciate the meeting minutes to follow through what happened in the projects that's selected. I support all the projects that were selected. Just on the very top of page 116 of the list of projects, fourth sentence down, Board Member Hirsch's project 1700. Just want to correct, those were mine that I had sent through. And then the next sentence has Board Member Hirsch's projects. So I'm taking those back, David.
Fair enough.
I wanted
Did you guys catch those corrections?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. All right. On that note, I move to approve the minutes with the adjustments per Board Member Adcock's comments.
Oh, second.
Thank you. And can we get a vote?
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Balte,
yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. Board member questions, comments, and announcements. I know we have a couple of announcements that I'd like to let Stephen make, and then I have a comment or two to say myself. Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, jumping right in, with Peter joining at 8:38, I did have a comment in my director's report just mentioning that there are the interviews for the 3 candidates that will occur on Monday of next week on the 24th. And there are 2 incumbents that are out of those 3 vacancies, as well as I wanted to note that this will be as outgoing member, Board Member Balte. It could potentially be your last meeting with us today. So I just wanted to make note of that. We do have the meeting canceled for the 4/3, the April 3rd meeting. So the following meeting would be on the 17th. So it's quite about a month or so from those interviews. So obviously council makes the appointments to the board. So things are in flux right now, but we are working in the background for some recognition for your years of service, Mr. Balte and Board Member Balte. And I just wanted to make that note here today at this meeting.
Yeah, and on that note, I'd like to take a minute to just say thank you personally. You've been a tremendous mentor to me, and you were chair before I stepped up to the position. And really, I've learned an incredible amount from watching you on this board over the past 3-4 years now that I've been serving. And really, I can't thank you enough for all your guidance, for all your efforts that you put towards making Palo Alto a better place to live and to play and to be. So thank you for everything. And it's sort of snuck up on us because we were not expecting next week's meeting to be canceled. So just really hats off and many thanks. Appreciate it.
I also want to just chime in and say thank you, Peter, for a lot of watching you has given me a lot of, understanding of how the board works, and your guidance has been instrumental for all of us. So thank you for your service, and hopefully you'll continue on other boards on Palo Alto, because you're only termed out on this one.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thank you so much, and I definitely not be prepared to. I'm not ready for you to leave right yet. So yeah, it's just so something, and look up on you, and I think you provide great guidance to the entire board, and do appreciate it, and wish you good luck in the future.
Well, brother, it's a big loss, very big loss to us. You bring us down to earth sometimes here when we're thinking about weird things. You say, well, what is the city rule here that's you people are not watching as carefully as you ought to, et cetera, et cetera. An awful lot we've all learned from you. I don't know what we'll do without it. You may get some phone calls.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's wonderful and really humbling to get all these accolades. Remember, our strength comes from us being together. I've never learned as much as I learned from each individual member, making me think differently. And it's hard to do, but that's our biggest strength, is to learn from each other. Good luck to everybody.
And on a slightly happier note, we will be seeing you at the Architectural Review Board's awards. So, we will at least have that to look forward to, because we're not going to let you go that easy. Thank you, Peter. All right. And with that, one more final item. We do have an ad hoc following up for 164 Hamilton. So we'll be doing that right after the hearing, and nothing else, then we are adjourned. Thank you very much.